The Scituate Planning Board of November 6th, 2014. Chairman Limbacher and Vice Chairman Pritchard are unable to attend tonight, so I will be chairing, so please bear with me. And Ann Burbine, our new alternate member, will be voting tonight. So can I have a motion to accept the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, excellent. Well, I'm very excited. We have the senior planner for MAPC, Matt Smith, with us this evening. So I'll have you introduce yourselves, both of you actually, and continue.
Yeah, I'm Chris McConaughey, and I'm the chairman of the Economic Development Commission. I've seen some of you before, but not all of you maybe. And so we're happy to have an opportunity to present to you a project that started a little over, maybe a little more than a year ago, with some excellent help from the MAPC. And it really started as an exploration of Scituate, and as far as economic development is concerned. And we really started, we wanted to engage the MAPC as an objective third party, kind of cut through the history of the town, maybe some of the subjective opinions that exist, and Matt has done a great job in coming in here and kind of assessing the town as far as the current conditions, and they've done a market analysis that's leveraged a lot of data that he's been able to access, and from that has worked with us to build out some recommendations, and so we're getting very close to the point where this will be kind of finalized, and what we really wanted to get out of this at the end of the day was something that's actionable, not a study that's interesting, that fills up some more space on a shelf, but something that then ends up being able to help us, to help you, to help the Board of Selectmen, to help the town better understand the opportunities, the limitations. It includes ideas, and Matt has done a great job of leveraging his experience doing this for other towns as well. So I'm going to turn this over to Matt Smith, who's going to walk you through this, and please feel free to to interrupt, ask questions, clarify. There's a lot of data, and some of it we'll want to kind of scoot over rather quickly because I think it'll be pretty self-evident, but if there's any place you want to dig a little deeper, just let us know.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for having me. As Chris was saying, we've been working on this for a little over a year, and we're at the point now where we've had actually a three-phase project. What I want to just talk about tonight in terms of the actual study is do a really quick overview of the study itself, go over the current conditions, the market analysis work, and then what we've developed is the recommendations for economic development within the town. Then specifically talk about what we've identified as the economic opportunity areas. That will follow that, and then we'll be talking about some zoning approaches that we think would actually be relevant in order to actually really encourage the development where it looks like it's possible. So again, please ask questions if something's unclear, and I'll be happy to answer that. In terms of the current conditions, I'm going to try to just go through this pretty quickly. Really what we found is that your population is growing, but it is growing older. Based on projections, the population over 65 is expected to increase by 71% by 2030. And that was actually from about 3 years ago, but it's about over 20 years, where all other age groups are expected to decline. This is not unique to Scituate. It's very common regionally. At the same time, your households are going to be growing at a faster rate. Households are getting smaller, so therefore, even though you're going to increase your population, you're going to increase the number of households at a higher percentage. So the good way to think of it, if you had 100 people, the old household size was 3 people, you'd have about 33 households. Now it's getting closer to 2, and you're going to have 50 for the same number of people. So that's something to consider. Your economy is actually quite small. You have a low labor force ratio. It's actually the lowest of all the surrounding communities. And you obviously have a high reliance on your residential tax base. Of the about 460 businesses, there's just under 3,400 workers in Scituate, with the highest number in education, healthcare, then accommodation and food service and retail trade, which is not surprising given that you do have a sizable tourist industry in the summer season as well. And then you also do have a concentration of maritime trades, which is quite unique actually. Your wages are lower than the state for the jobs here, about 38,800 compared to 60,000, not surprising given the higher concentration of things like retail, accommodation, things like that. And there is low employment growth projected by the state, just over 2% between 2010 and 2020, so you've probably hit some of that. In terms of your workforce, it's different. You have a very low unemployment rate, and it's been consistently lower than the state and the county. You have a higher educational attainment than the surrounding county. Incomes are lower than some of your surrounding towns, but they're significantly higher than the state or the county as well, so it is a higher income area. However, your workers are traveling farther than any other community in the South Shore as an average, so that just leads to some of the things we're going to talk about, and the fact that the accessibility here is a little bit tough. In terms of your housing trends, as you well know, that you're predominantly an owner-occupied single-family housing community. Sales did hold relatively steady actually during the recession, which is really good for you. And your median prices are actually high compared to the county and the state. In fact, your condos in particular are very high. They're actually, the median condo price is higher than the house, but that's not surprising given you have a lot of condos right on the water, and that has a premium. What's led to, though, is there's little lack of ownership opportunity for first-time homeowners and people who are downsizing, and seniors, particularly those on fixed income. So that's something to really consider. And just even from the numbers, but also from having discussions with brokers, you do lack enough rental opportunities here, so you could lose more. From doing all that analysis, we actually then worked with the Community Opportunities Group, was our sub-consultant, to work on a marketing study, to really understand what the opportunities here by looking at data and trends, interviewing a lot of people. So that's what we did. We started out, and we actually did these together. We interviewed, I think, about 15 to 20 different people, businesses, from residents, groups, etc. What we identified were kind of commonalities, that there are many strengths here. The high quality of life is very important. The waterfront and tourism and the growth of that has been very positive and seen as a strength. The local retail is really strong in that there's been a growing restaurant scene, which is good, especially since you do have the meals tax, which is excellent. And then the commuter rail access over the last, I guess, 5 to 7 years, is it now, is a real plus. So that helps you a lot. But the weakness is the access from other ways. You are far from highways. It's not easy to get here, so that does limit some of your actual opportunities. Your market reach, so that's those consumers, it's limited because half of your market area is the ocean, and that's something we talk about, whereas if you're an inland, you're drawing customers from a 360 radius, where here you're only getting half, so that's interesting. The town could be a little bit more business friendly, but that's more about just like understanding the process, as opposed to not once people are here they get things done, but it's understanding the process that we heard can be difficult at times. And then, as we already said, your low commercial tax base, you do rely heavily on the residential. So what Community Opportunities Group did, and then MAPC as well, is then we looked at your different sectors. And so what we did is we kind of looked what's existing, and this is just a quick summary, and then what your opportunities are. So in your maritime sector, you have a small-scale commercial fishing fleet. There's marinas and recreational and transient boaters. That's really a strong thing here, especially seasonally. And then you also have the marine research going at NOAA. So that's very unique to the area. Your growth opportunities, from what the analysis kind of showed, was the seasonal, really trying to boost some of that, maritime, and this is going to be related to the next slide, but tourism, things like charter excursion boats, different private boat rentals, things like kayak paddleboard, things that can just draw more people and revenue to the town. Year-round, expand maritime research and education, looking for opportunities to do that, and we'll talk about some of those strategies soon. And then, as well as then strengthening the connection to that local fishing industry, maybe trying to find linkages within the fishermen and the local restaurants and markets and things like that. In terms of tourism, this was identified as your greatest opportunity through the market analysis. The harbor is a huge amenity with the recreational boating, the shopping in the harbor area. It's very unique, actually. And with the events you have, like the Heritage Days and others, even your First Fridays. So you have a really good pulse going on there. Your beaches are well known, as are you have many weekly and monthly renters in the summer, so your population does grow in the summer months. Things like weddings, recreation opportunities as well. So that's where the growth opportunities are. There was an identification for the possibility for another hotel in the area. You're very under hotel roomed in this region, so that could be a real opportunity for you. And also B&Bs. You only have 1 or 2. It seems to change. I can't remember if it's 1 or 2. I think it's 2 now. And then restaurants. There's all kinds, but there's especially opportunities for some of what we call limited service. You can get more of those full service sit down, but there's not really many cafes, places you can just step in and get something quickly, particularly in the harbor that was mentioned, or near the commuter rail. So those are opportunities, and that's also an opportunity given that you do have the meals tax. Recreation, so maritime related, more beach access was discussed, bicycle kayak rentals, really kind of boosting the whole overall potential for the tourism industry here. And then promotion of existing amenities. Having a municipally owned golf course is a really huge amenity, so how can you promote that and maybe benefit from that in other ways? One of those could be perhaps that would be a good location for like a hotel and conference center. Retail. You have a really rich variety of independent retailers with very low vacancy rates. You really don't have much vacancy here. That shows that there is room for growth there. And then people kept mentioning the restaurant scene. So through crunching a bunch of numbers, doing a retail gap analysis, which is a supply and demand, and then doing what we call a capture rate, the market study identified the potential for about 80,000 square feet of supportable retail within the town over the next 5 years or so. Most of it would be concentrated in the village areas, and there really are some on 3A, but there really is limited opportunity on 3A for various reasons. One of that is there's wetlands around it. Some of it, there's lots of actually residential already built up there. And also, when you cross the Cohasset border, they already have a lot of that retail that's there, and there are some vacancies there, so that's something to be concerned of. It's the type of retail you're going to be going for. It's going to be more specialty retail here as opposed to like the larger big box. But there could be opportunity for convenience goods. That's things, people can jump in really quick and get things on the way home from work. That can be anything from a market to another, perhaps pharmacy, and then specialty foods. You have a market in the harbor, but there could be opportunities near North Scituate as well as in Greenbush. And then smaller regional chains. We're not talking about these big, 100 store chains, but looking for regional stores that might have 2 to 10 outlets or looking to expand. That's a good way to actually reach out and look for stores that might be interested in locating here. Look for similar communities in the stores that are there, and that's a good marketing strategy. In terms of housing, just the projections show from household, you're expected to grow by 700 households by 2030. So think of each household as a housing unit. So what's happening though is they're getting smaller. So it's going to be a growth in senior households, but also it would be helpful to attract more young professionals. And there might be a transition as people are actually downsizing from a larger house to a smaller unit. That's where those market opportunities open, particularly for families. However, you don't have a lot of the type of housing that a lot of seniors, as well as actually young professionals, are interested in as well. And it's not just in the cities now, it's really becoming even more of a suburban choice as well. It's that preference for small units. If you look at these two charts, the left, where you see that single family homes, 84%, that's your current inventory. Based on some analysis that Community Opportunities Group did, and it's similar to stuff that MAPC does, we look at how the preferences are changing. And even today's population, even though people are living in single family, they would actually very well maybe preferring a different option, things like townhomes, 2 or 3, in more planned communities or next to amenities. So this is more of a breakdown of what the potential really could be. So really start thinking about the type of units that are being proposed. It's actually very important economically in terms of attracting people. So that's the opportunity. Smaller, less expensive units, multifamily, especially near the train stations. Access is becoming more and more important. Preferences are really switching nationally towards more walkable environments, so really think about that. So, and then mixed use in all the village areas. So probably more rental in Greenbush, given that it is a large area. It has the train right there. Given Scituate Harbor, continue to go with condo. That would make a lot of sense. It's a value. And then rental and condo in North Scituate. It's a smaller village opportunity that would have a very different makeup, and the opportunities are smaller there. Greenbush, without a doubt, has the largest opportunity, given the amount of land that's there, the underdeveloped land, and the presence of the train. So your constraints, just again, your access does limit. That's why you're not going to get the big retail chains. It's just you don't have the market for it. They want to be near highways. They want to have that good access to get a regional draw. There's not a ton of vacant developable land. There are constraints here. There's about 255 developable acres that are, I would say, easily developed or more easily developed. Nothing is always, very things are easily developed, but that seem predictable. But it's scattered. It's not in big chunks. There's not a lot of publicly owned land that can usually be things that you can leverage for development, but that's not, unfortunately, really one of your, I would say, offerings. Then the recession was a huge impediment to the things you were doing, which were really proactive. Getting the Village Business Overlay District, getting the train opening happened at the worst time, so it really delayed the opportunity. But you are seeing things change now, and there are proposals coming through, so it's good to get ahead of it now. Your infrastructure limitations, this is really specific to the North Scituate area. The lack of sewer, we're going to talk about the opportunity here. There's a ton of opportunity there, however, you can't do it because you would need the sewer in there first, and that's a huge impediment. And then obviously the flooding issues with the FEMA changes and everything like that, and that's really an issue mostly in the harbor. So, in terms of the recommendations, these were developed, and this is where we're at this point. We had a series of recommendations that were finished at their early summer, and then in phase 3, which we'll talk about, it was really looking at the opportunity areas, which are Greenbush, North Scituate, and the harbor, as well as a little bit in Humrock, and limited around 3A. So we just kind of go through. I'll highlight the big things. I'm not going to go through every action. Take a look at the document. I can either forward a PDF. There's a couple hard copies here, because with the way it's organized is we have a goal. There's about, I think, 6 goals or 7 goals. Then there's strategies within it, and then there's specific actions that you can achieve or take to achieve those strategies. So that's how it was organized. And then there's also an implementation matrix within the document where we identify who the potential responsible parties would be. So there's, it really is geared so that people can track and really understand who they need to reach out to. So the first one, improve the marketing of Scituate locally and regionally to attract more visitors and investment. This is the recommendation because we heard a lot that there needs to be more coordination. A lot of people, while in the region know what's in Scituate, maybe you need to start reaching a little further out to attract people in terms of the tourism. So get a comprehensive marketing strategy to attract new visitors, but also residents and businesses. Actually marketing Scituate to businesses is important. And there's different ways you can do that. The other was make Scituate the most business-friendly town. Other towns, for instance, there's a great example, and I've spoke to the EDC about this quite a bit. Like the town of Dedham, for instance, has a great guide. It's these simple pamphlets that this is how you get a permit through. This is where you go, and it's about 10 different pages. If it's a restaurant, you do this. If it's a store, you do this. It's fantastic. It actually won an award from the Massachusetts chapter of the American Planning Association. It's a great example. Improving wayfinding signage and just to guide visitors. You've got 3A going here. Greenbush is really well situated. You can, really, with good signage, you can really probably attract more people. You've got the sign, I see it's been cleared for North Scituate. That's great. You can see it better. But even more, I thought dynamic signage could really help, but also within the areas. So within Greenbush, once there's more of an area plan, how to guide people to the right places, it's really important. It's also unique because it's on the way to the harbor. So there's a way to capture maybe more and more spending.
And I'd just like to interject one comment, which is that the EDC has funding for marketing in our budget this year. And so these 3 strategies under this goal are all on our radar screen. And we have an RFP out right now to actually in development to engage a marketing design firm or advertising agency to help us with a lot of the branding and creative design so that we can do it in a strategic and holistic manner. And obviously, we would kind of lead that effort, but then it would be, vetted with local stakeholders and others. But the positive that I just want to point out is that we do have funding for that.
That's great.
And it is very important, and it's becoming more important, I think, as different communities are all trying to attract. And the next one, and this is going to be a focus of a little bit later in this discussion, but so really maximize the benefits. We talked about how it's not as accessible here, but really maximize your actual geographic location as a coastal community, but also as a town with the established villages, and you have an amazing amenity, and you have 2 train stations. So really work that to attract that economic investment you're talking about, and that's going to be the retail, perhaps more maritime research, but also the residents who can support it. So 2A, we're talking about continue to focus on new development, commercial, multifamily, residential, mixed use in those existing village centers where the market opportunities are strongest as identified in the market study. And then the most, I would say, important, particularly for North Scituate, is to ensure that infrastructure can support desired development types. Really try to, if you can prioritize getting that sewer extended there and hopefully maybe move it up in the queue, that would be very helpful. It would open up the economic opportunity. And then there's other things, improve public transit to and from Scituate. You're getting a nice pilot to do return the weekend service. That's going to be very important for things like tourism, getting day trippers, things like that. Study the potential for additional development in town in Widow's Walk Golf Course. Perhaps you could get a good conference center. That could be very attractive to smaller corporate events who are looking for the activity, but also the gathering space. Also good for weddings and things like that. And tourism. You have a golf course. That's fantastic. A public one that people can actually use, not private. Identify strategic parcels along 3A, and there's a map I'll show you, but there are some areas that I think would be good to target and look for those, opportunities. The other goal will be a growing and thriving tourism industry with more amenities and programming. This was brought up in many of the interviews that more programming would be really beneficial. But so programming, that can be everything from festivals to movie nights, things on the harbor, music events, just to draw people down there and, honestly, then spend money, go to the restaurants. It's a way to bring people there. And it can, having different maybe festivals in Greenbush when it starts developing more, but also North Scituate. Start thinking strategically about how to support the businesses in each of your commercial areas. The hotel we've already discussed, I think that's really important. It looks like there's a really good opportunity, so start reaching out to different hotel operators that might be interested. Promote the existing, cultural, open space, and recreational amenities. 3A, the one thing that's really interesting, you have a lot of open space here. Look for opportunities for more trails. You have trails in town. How do you really draw people to them and let them know if they come to Scituate that this is actually an activity? It's not just the harbor. There's actually many other amenities here that can make it more of like a complete, short weekend trip. We get to do many things. Make Scituate a center for arts and culture. There's many different ways. There are different types of ways. You can have music festivals, you can have movie festivals, you have that great little theater in the harbor. That's really unique too. See ways you can work to get that kind of programming. That attracts people. It can be very interesting. You can even do a little film festival for all, that could be something maritime related. These kinds of things can be really fun. And then advocate for the weekend MBTA. This is actually something we came up with and you already have, and good job. So that's fantastic. Another, expand maritime industries, including tourism, but research and educational opportunities. And I know that there's been talk of this for years, but really the fact that NOAA's here, it's a really unique thing to build on that and promote this as an education. So it's about reaching out to different schools. And we're talking anything from community colleges to maritime things to even larger institutions who might even want a smaller. I'm not sure if Pier 44, but maybe you could even do some classes in there at different times. That would be actually interesting, and you could use it for that space. But look for those opportunities, and then really get Scituate on the map even more for that. The other would be, where are we here? Oh, further grow Scituate's healthcare cluster. It's actually one of your strongest industries here, and the fact that this could be an advantage. You have several communities who are also isolated. You have a cluster here. Try to build that, particularly in the Greenbush area. It actually showed, and those are good paying jobs, so that's another benefit to that cluster as well. And then we talked about the senior population is going to be growing, and so looking for locations for assisted care facilities, things like that, close to the existing village areas would be really helpful. It's going to be a growing market, and then there's also jobs that come with them. So you're kind of looking at two different things, or addressing two things. And then finally, given that you do have limited commercial development opportunity, look for ways to really increase additional revenue streams. So we've already talked about, so you have the local options meals tax. If you attract more restaurants, it's not huge money, but every check brings in more money to you, and that's really helpful. And that's not a type of tax that prevents people from going to a town. Most towns have them. So really try to build on your restaurant culture, because the reality is that restaurants tend to like to be next to other restaurants. When you have a cluster, people come. If they can't get into one, they go to another, and vice versa. It can be a really strong, successful strategy. And you've got these great villages, which are what people are looking more and more to. So how do you target them to create that experience? It's really helpful. If you can get one or a hotel, look into the local option occupancy excise tax. So you'd get revenue from every hotel room that is rented. So that would be fantastic. It's another revenue stream. It's not going to be adding millions, but it's going to add for every penny counts, and that's a way to build it. So
did you actually research the other towns around that would have that, or do have that?
Many towns do have them. I didn't look to see which in this area do have the excise tax. I know many communities that do. I'm working in, for instance, like Stoneham, they have it for their hotels. Salem has it for their hotels. So it's pretty common. And it's not one of those things that, people don't really look for a hotel room and see which taxes are going to come on. It's pretty standard. People are used to it. So, but it's a good revenue stream. And it's steady, which is also good. It will be seasonal here. You'll get bumps, but that's the way it would work. And then look for other ways to raise additional revenue. One thing was talking about if you can open up some additional beach parking for surrounding, whether it's day passes, things like that, and actually get revenue to the town for that. Look for those strategies. It could be a possible solution. I know that could, there's a lot of discussion that would have to be for that, but it's an opportunity. So those are really the key goals and strides. When you look in the actual document, there's probably 5 or 6 actually individual actions for a lot of those. So there's with the way it's organized is there's a first step, there's small things you can do to get the ball rolling, and then they usually lead to bigger things. It's better to do that. Sometimes the smaller things you do that have impact and people see that things are happening, it's good because they do lead to those larger issues. So the next thing we want to get into, so phase 3 really identified looking at these specific opportunity areas, and they were the village areas. So what we've been doing over the last 3 or 4 months is really looking at identifying things like, I think there's actually a slide about this. There are. We were, the last village plans were all done pre-recession and then the overlay during the recession, so we wanted to look at them with a little, like with fresher eyes and with the market analysis now in place. So we looked at Greenbush, North Scituate, the harbor area, and then Humrock as well, which is a very unique amenity. So what we did is we did an opportunity site analysis, and we went through, we actually grouped parcels for this type of analysis just to see the difference with different types of development and what kind of tax revenue generation would come from them. And so that was the next thing. So we identified high opportunity sites, then we did a revenue analysis, mixed use versus retail only, which I'm going to just show you an example of, just to show the benefit of them. And then this informed some final recommendations, which I'll show you, just these conceptual plans that have been developed. So the site selection, just really quickly, it was a scoring system. We clustered sites that would make sense for larger developments. The larger ones scored higher because you have a higher opportunity to get transformative development for the community on those sites. Then there's parcel ownership. Obviously, if you've got 5 parcels that have 5 different owners, it's much harder. But if there was shared ownership, that scored higher too. We did what we call it an IL value ratio. It's the improvements versus land. Essentially, any structures, the value of that structure compared to the land. If the structures are valued more than land, it's usually not necessarily an opportunity site because there's value there. But if the structures are valued lower than the land, it's usually a redevelopment opportunity because there's basically the ability for the owner to be more successful, but also for the town to generate more revenue. And then we looked at, if there was 1 floor and you could do three floors, you're obviously missing some FAR. You could actually go up and probably make a greater profit. And then visibility. Retail, specifically, the visibility is crucial to retail. You have to be able to see it. So if it was on a corner near like a strategic intersection, that scored higher than if it was down further off. So that was how we did that.
And this was really just it was kind of an exploration. Is that fair to say?
Yep. Yeah.
In the sense it was kind of like, let's play with some different scenarios using this this model and see what comes up and see what kind of insight it gives us directionally. And the parcels that we chose were really just for examples. Mm-hmm. In other words, these are not recommendations. These parcels that we noted, this is what you should do. And these were just, we picked them for examples.
Yeah, you'll see one of the appendices is this analysis, and it all over it says this is not recommendations. This was for analysis only, just to show the difference between what could be generated. And I'll just quickly show. So, for instance, just to score, this is the MBTA lot. This is the section that was for sale. We just grouped that along with the corner parcel because if you could, consolidate, that would be great. And they just scored. So the parcel acreage is 3 acres. That's really strong. So it got a 3. It was a score of 1 to 3. The ownership is 1 or 2. So that was solid. The IL ratio 0.2. There's really nothing on it. So there wasn't that. That's a really good opportunity for development. The floors, there was 0 or 1. So you can go up. Great. Visibility corner, excellent. So it's totaled 15. Got like the highest score. It was a very high opportunity. That's how we looked at it. And then what we did is we did a revenue analysis. We worked with the EDC to select a few different parcels within each of the village areas just to see what would be the difference. So what kind of revenue would you generate from a mixed use scenario, and which would be a retail on the ground floor, 2 floors of residential, versus revenue that would be generated just from retail, which would be more likely in many situations. In your underlying zoning, that's what it would really basically be allowed, and then with the overlay you could do more. So we actually just did some analysis, and it's very complicated, but essentially with the mixed use scenario, for that parcel, you could get about 58,000 square feet of residential and 29,000 square feet of retail. That includes all surface parking based on the ratios within your current zoning, just to see what it would be. Then we took the values, the average values of residential and commercial within the town, did some calculations. We actually went very conservative with retail. We went a little higher than what the average values are. Because I didn't want it to look Some of your retail's older, so we needed to bump it up. But essentially, you get about $216,000 in revenue if this is fully developed. This would be like the maximum build out. Versus if you did retail only, you get 44,000 square feet because the parking ratios would be pretty big there too. And you'd estimate about $93,000 in tax revenue. So there is a big significant difference. We also wanted to look, because we know a lot of people, the fear in a lot of communities is that what is the educational cost going to be? So does that kind of like basically just minimize the value? We did, I think it was about 21 of every 5 units in a multifamily would have a child, which is actually a fairly high ratio. I mean, these are going to be probably 1 and 2 bedroom units, maybe some 3s. So typically there's not a lot of kids in these, but we still did it anyway, and the revenue still turned out to be higher. So it still seemed to be a revenue generation benefit for the community to go in that direction. So it just shows that mixed use really can be a strong revenue generator for the town. So that's quite good. It also brings more shoppers to your area. So you're actually increasing the spending capacity of the town, and then that could actually support a little more retail. What the market analysis did, it looked at existing conditions. It did not take into account the additional households that would come. So that would be something that would be factored in. So you're bringing more spending power to the town that could be spent locally, but you're also bringing more revenue. So that's solid as well. We did that in each of the villages.
Does that make sense, by the way? About that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Good. That can always be a little tricky.
Yeah, no, it's,
So, and there will be an appendices that just shows this. This is not, perfect analysis, but it's a good, just kind of back of the envelope way to see what makes sense. So in Greenbush, all those red parcels were the ones we kind of selected that made sense. They were not small parcels. They did not have residential on them because those are the hardest to redevelopment, especially if it's a single family. So
Those red ones were the ones we considered, right?
we had considered, yeah. And we discussed them and we kind of ranked them and scored.
And then we narrowed them down.
Exactly. So if you look, the priorities for A, D, and H, it's actually, I wish I had my pointer. I knew I forgot something. Does it? No. So I'll just step up here really quickly. So the real priorities that were strong were really along this corridor, based on visibility, everything. And interestingly enough, that's really where you would probably want to see the highest, like in terms of the village center. It's closest to the train. It offers a lot of that. Whereas when you're getting up towards J in the top, you're getting more into residential. You're further away. You don't want to spread your retail around. You want to try to concentrate it. That makes much more sense, and it allows people to stop once and go to multiple stores. It's a way for you to capture even more spending here.
And that's really one of the limitations that Cohasset has kind of run into on 3A, don't you think?
Spread out, yeah.
It's spread out. And so, you've got to jump in your car to go here, and then you got to jump in versus trying to consolidate and create a real center.
Exactly. And so then what we did is then we looked at AD and then L up there, just to see what the revenue would be. And in every case, it turned out to be the same. You did generate more revenue from the mixed use scenario. But when you look at it, you kind of look at where the opportunities are, and the highest, like for multifamily, would be higher, like J up there, and then I, which is actually, I'm not even sure it's like the light industrial parcel.
Scituate concrete pipe.
Yeah, concrete. So like that could be an amazing opportunity there if that is ever to change hands, especially because it's right on the right side of the train station. It'd be a quick walk. It could be very attractive to many people. Based on the analysis we did, we came up with more of a conceptual plan about how you might want to really think more conceptually about Greenbush itself. So what I was saying, the greatest opportunities were along the Driftway. And so that's really, you'd really want to go in that higher density mixed use, where you would maybe want to go a couple floors above retail, concentrate it. Remember, you only have about 80,000 square feet of retail potential that would be supported, so you want to concentrate it. You could get, on these parcels, you could get several 100,000 if you just actually built them out completely. So you want to be strategic. So really, I think the way we look at it, you'd want to go the higher density in that area, in that corridor, create that center. Where you've got on Country Way, where you already have some mixed use, that'd be more like a medium density. It's more a little more neighborhoody. You're also going to get more traffic along the Driftway, so attention, visibility, that's where you want to really focus it. And then maybe more like, you could get some office, but more residential multifamily in those outer areas to support and really solidify those concentrated development areas. Because what you're going to do is, this is a fantastic opportunity. You're having commuter traffic, so if you have commuter retail that's well situated there, you can then actually get those customers. The Dunkin' Donuts is a prime example. Things that are easy. But then you're also going to have more residents around it to support it in the off hours, which is very important. So that would be the best way. So central TOD village area, highest densities near the train station, mixed use village along Country Way, just kind of going with what's already happening there, and the overlay is actually really good for that. Really focus your business attraction and marketing on medical and professional offices in here, so you can have mixed use. It could be retail, but also some office combined with the retail. This is your opportunity for that in this area. And then when it comes to retail, think of things that are going to appeal not just to your residents, but your commuters who are using that station, but then also the visitors who are going to be passing through when think of people who are driving to the harbor and they forget something, they can stop here on their way out. They've shopped in the harbor, they're going to come out. So that's a good way to think of that as well. And then think of connectivity and gateway signage. If you're going to create a village, the more easy it is to get around, the better you're going to do. So think of those connections. You've that great water amenity right there. It's kind of hidden. How do you let people know that it's there? And maybe find ways to open it up a bit. So that's really the way we've thought about Greenbush, and we'll get more in detail about the ideas for zoning specifically for Greenbush in just a minute. I just want to walk through the other two, actually three. We did the same thing in North Scituate. These were the parcels that we thought looked like the greatest opportunities. The ones that scored highest were A1, which is the MBTA. Is it the MBTA? Who owns that? Is that the MBTA?
That's the overflow lot.
Yeah, the overflow lot, which is very underutilized. Then C, which is the one-story commercial, like right when you get onto, is it Gannett or Gannett?
Gannett,
When you get there, so it's one story, even though you have the zoning in place for more. Tremendous opportunity for more redevelopment. And then G1, which is kind of half of that block as common ownership, that was seen as a good opportunity. So we wanted to just do the same analysis, and it was similar. There was a couple $100,000 more in revenue that would be generated from larger developments in there than just retail. So that was good. So with this, it was a little bit, pretty basic. It's not a huge area, so what you really want to do is concentrate the retail to the south and east of the parking lot along the existing actual village area. There's some really good parcels there that could be over time redeveloped. Again, you need sewer. This is the second busiest stop on the Greenbush line, so you've got a lot of traffic coming in too. So capture it. Look for ways to capture those people. And then when you're going towards the Cohasset line, that's really more of maybe redevelopment. There's affordable housing up there. So residential multifamily up there, making sure that you do, preserve the affordable units, or at least whatever you develop, make sure that you have those affordable units there. So that's a really good strategy. It would be a really nice, compact, solid village. The harbor's interesting. So these are all the parcels that haven't been redeveloped, and there's some really sizable ones. We did even include actually the big Cole Parkway, just because it's this big giant waterfront site. And then those are the others that haven't been. So we just did the same analysis, and again, we found the same findings. But it's just a good way of looking at that, because there still is opportunity there. Really, things are working. Your overlay is working down there. You've gotten the type of development you want. There is an ongoing parking study that MAPC is doing. The way that's incorporated, because it's not completed yet, is that the plan should follow those parking recommendations and look for opportunities. But really what it is that when you look at the opportunities, you got some constraints. It's focused in the summer, the parking capacity, which we just talked, and the flooding concerns, but there's things you can do for all of those. So your opportunities would be to attract marine research, education, and boat repair, things like that. So that's where maybe Pier 44 could be used, but maybe in those gateway redevelopment areas that are in orange, maybe you could get some office space or some classroom space in some way if you get the right institution to rent space. That's one way to do that. Mixed-use retail condo, that's what we've done a lot of. There's room for more. So that's really a strong idea, and really cement this area, create even more of a harbor village and attraction, both for your residents, because it's a great thing. You have this great year-round amenity, and then you have this really kind of fun, busy season. Build that up. More full and limited service eating establishments. We heard time and time again, it's great that there's some restaurants, but you just can't go to a bakery. There's not, other than Dunkin' Donuts, you're not just going to sit down for a second. Those are huge opportunities, and really working with, you can just try to attract that, go to other communities. Who wants to open a second? It's a captive audience, and a boost in the summer, which those businesses look for. More programming in those shoulder seasons. When we say shoulder, it's spring and fall. So you really want to try to look for different programming. Maybe have little festivals. Find ways to get people down there and frequent the stores. Fill those restaurants. It's a good way to do it. It also creates community. It's ways for people to gather in those times when they might not be as much. And then there was a lot of talk about open space for the water. This is a little hard to explain. So within the Cole Parkway, I see there's a green section. Maybe there's ways. It's very crowded in the summer months, but it's not the rest of the year. Maybe look for strategies where it's
you can paint it in a way that it's more of an open space at different times, have some different kinds of paving, but when it's needed, it becomes parking. So look for those flexible situations. That could be a really good strategy without losing parking. Look for ways to restripe. That stuff will come out of the parking study, so I don't want to go too far into it because I don't actually know what it's going to say yet. But then on the other side, like, it could also be a redevelopment in long term. If somehow parking can be accommodated, it shouldn't be ruled out. The zoning actually allows for it. So I think these are things just to consider in the long term. It could also add and kind of make, a larger village area. It would be a challenge without doubt, but I don't think you should ever say no to anything. You should think about the ways that maybe if it can be worked out, it could happen. Again, those gateway redevelopments at either end, capture people's attention. You are here. That's really important. And then purple are just, parking strategies. Parking management strategies, there's been a lot of talk about parking behind the gas station. That could be an opportunity. And then the connections to Pier 44 and then other areas. Even potential over long term, if there's ever any redevelopment opportunity as you're going up the hill, maybe for some smaller units, things like that, that could be really good to extend your village. So that would be good. So this is actually really kind of continue what you're doing because you're doing a good job here and it's a well-known area, but it could be even better. And so you could capture more. Hummerock, seasonal community, limits off-season sales potential. There are more and more year-round residents, but still very limited market reach. Not only is the ocean, but it's very hard to get to. It is essentially a barrier island. It's a peninsula, I guess. There's limited public parking, flooding concerns, obviously. Anyone who's seen the news knows about that. But even though there's a little there is some potential for mixed-use development, perhaps a little more townhouse development. You could get maybe a small inn here as part of that, just to make it a little bit more of like a draw and maybe more water-based recreation and just to increase that summer tourism. You've got great beaches there. There's some good parcels there that are underdeveloped, and you really could do that without really changing the character, and then even support those businesses that are there even more, especially when you combine what's over on the other side in Marshfield. So those are the ideas. Increasing beach access. Actually, I'm talking too much. I have to take it. And then finally, 3A, that there are limited opportunities. This map just shows anything that was like light blue, that's where there's actually wetlands. You see like little like black dots between like the large, that's where there's actually already housing. So there's already a bunch of housing there. There is wetlands, there's open space that's protected, that's the green. But there are these little pockets that maybe like those circles where you could find some nice little smaller commercial that would be good for getting passed through. They're kind of where there's already some concentrations, but also even in this area, maybe right around Town Hall, if there's any opportunities in any of these parcels, there's already a traffic light. It is a center place. That's where you'd want to target. Where the gas station is just up the road, that would be an area. And then right along the Cohasset line, then you can try to, be kind of building off of what's already there, where there's already a corridor. So those would be the opportunities, but they are limited. And given the market study, that's really not the market here that would really benefit you most.
Since that's only kind of the top half of 3A, if you look down as it goes, like where Kennedy's, the VFW, the Kiwanis building in that area? Yeah, exactly. Any particular potential there?
Those are the areas what we would suggest, and I think it's the way we wrote it in the opportunities. That's where you should look. Those are the strategic areas where there's already some interest or there's already something that might be compatible. That's where you would want to go. The closer you get to the residential areas, the harder it's going to be just from when it comes to just developing that. But there may be even closer to Greenbush if there's opportunities further down. It would be more on you'd have to really study that more in greater detail. Because you don't want to, the worst thing you could do, you want to cluster it. Because you don't want to have one here, one there, one here, because then you're not kind of getting that economy of scale or the draw of scale. Mm-hmm. So it could actually be really hard for businesses to do well if they're just this one business plopped out down in the middle of a corridor. So that's something to consider. So the one thing, this is where we're all leading now, and these are the different zoning approaches. And I'll just really talk. So we've looked at the village business overlay districts. They're really good districts. They allow mixed use, but by special permit, up to 16 dwelling units per acre, or almost per acre, 40,000 square feet. I'll keep saying acre because I'll just mess up. But then with some other considerations, you can get up to about 20 in Greenbush and North Scituate, and then up to 36 in Scituate Harbor. The underlying zoning only allows up to 4 dwelling units per acre. So there is a significant bump up. So you are doing what would help create these areas that we're talking about. The heights are very reasonable, and you do have the 15% affordable unit requirement. Just off the top of my head and what things we've talked about, there could be some changes just to the village business district. The way you do it now, you kind of have the general for all of them, and then you have some specific requirements for the different ones, like for when it comes to the densities. Just off the top, increasing some of the density in Greenbush to be more like the harbor. You've got the train, it would make sense to have that. Ground floor retail requirements, right now it says it has a ground floor, but it's very non-specific. For a large parcel, you might not want to require the entire ground floor to be retail. That would maybe take up too much. You might want to change regulations to maybe say something like all street-facing retail, or a percentage of a ground floor would require it, so that you're not gobbling up all the opportunity in one spot. That's one way to look at it. And then more design criteria. You've got some in there, but minimal. And I think one of the things, maintaining the character of Scituate is very important for these kinds of developments, because you want it to be consistent, you want it to be pedestrian oriented, you want it to be approachable, quite frankly, very livable. I would say human scale. So that's it, which then led, and it's in this, we're talking about 40R districts. This is a good option, particularly for Greenbush right now. It would be a good option probably for North Scituate, but in the future it requires there to be infrastructure in place. So right now, given the sewer's not there, you couldn't even consider that for North Scituate. But what this is, and just to give an overview, 40R is actually a state law. It was enacted in, I think, 2006 or 2004, that encourages municipalities to zone for dense residential and mixed-use smart growth development near transit stations or other town centers. What it does is that's a requirement. For instance, if you're within a half a mile of a train station, that you can do a 40R, and then there's other criteria you can do. So essentially, they have to be highly suitable areas to do the infrastructure. So your sewer has to be in place, the water has to be in place, and they have to offer things like pedestrian access. This all plays into the idea of near transit, so that's why it's there. Many communities have adopted them, even local communities nearby, like Plymouth has. Kingston has, but many throughout the Commonwealth. Oh wow, you can't see the rest of it. This is actually a map of Massachusetts that I can see, but up there it's actually gray, but these are all the communities as of a couple years ago who've actually adopted them. And what it does is, I'll talk about why this is an advantage and why it's very interesting for right now for Greenbush. But as you can see, they're all over the state. And I'll talk about what they are. What they do, they require mixed income housing, which is a 20% affordability requirement. So it's 5% more than what you currently require in your overlay. And it's to 80% area median income. So it's very similar in terms of the affordability. However, the difference is that currently you're not going to get any incentives from development, but the 40R, there's actually 3 incentives that are built in, and I'm going to go through them in a second, and they're actually very strong, and why this could be a really good idea. The difference is that it has to be allowed by right. It's not a special permit process. You have to have minimum densities, 8 units per acre for single families, which would be more cottage style probably, 2 to 3 family, 12 unit acre density, and then multifamily up to at least 20 per acre, which is similar to what a lot of the projects would be, and even with the village overlay. It's interesting, you can have many sub-districts. You can have a 40R, but you can have a higher density area that allows mixed use. You can have another sub-area that only allows like a lower density mixed use. And you can have just a residential allowance. But you just have to they all just have to make sure that they meet the applicable minimum density requirements for the type of development. This is the interesting thing, but what is included in 40R is a very detailed site plan review and design guidelines. So even though it's by right, they do have to meet the design criteria that you would create as part of this district. And this is everything from the size of the building, the number of floors, the type of materials, how literally where entrances are located, to the streetscape, trees. It can be as detailed as you want, actually. The more detailed, the better, but it can't prohibit development. It has to be the whole point is that the idea is that you're trying to create a place specifically, and there's far more detail, but that would be something we talk about a little bit more.
When you're saying by right, maybe you need to explain a little bit that there is a site plan review process involved, so there would still be planning board review and approval involved, even though it's it's technically, called by right, it still does have a whole, involved review process. It just wouldn't be a special permit where there's the 4 out of 5. It would just be a simple majority vote.
Exactly. And the thing is, but that's interesting, because you have a specific set of design guidelines that are attached to this, they have to meet those guidelines. They can't be outside of them. So that's the interesting. component of it. So you really get to shape development. I'll talk about why that's an advantage in a second. But this is what is interesting. So this is the first incentive. When you do a 40R district, there's something called the zoning incentive payment. Just by adopting the 40R and getting it approved by DHCD, Department of Housing and Community Development, you receive a payment based on the number of what they call bonus units or incentive units that are possible. You do calculations when you're doing it. So down below is the chart. If the 40R district that you do gets can get up to 20 units, the town gets a $10,000 payment when the ordinance is adopted and approved. 21 up to 100.
When the ordinance is adopted and approved, can you just explain that a little
You
bit?
would adopt it as a community the same way you would do any other zoning, and then you send the final ordinance. It's already gone, there's a process with DHCD, you send it, you apply for it, and then you adopt it, and then you do the final approval. Once DHCD does the final approval, then you get the payment. It's the process, and
So
there's
it has nothing to do with the actual units per se, it's just
Not
what's
yet.
what's
Right.
potentially.
conceivable.
by
Yeah.
just by creating that, these are the level of payments, and it's, so up to 100, you get 75,000. If it's 101 to 500 units, the town receives $350,000, and if it's 501 or more, you get 600,000. That's just for adopting and approving the district itself.
And that's based on the potential
The
number of
potential,
units.
yes, and there's calculations you have to do. You have to like remove some open space or wetlands, but that's just how it did. So in the simplest, if it was just a clean slate and there was no, if you had a 5-acre 40R district, 20 units per acre allowed, that would lead to 100 potential units. So the town would get a $75,000 payment when that was adopted. If you went a little higher, larger, you would get the next level. But then this is the other thing. This is the second incentive. Bonus unit payments. When every unit for which a building permit is issued, you then get a payment, and I was wrong at the last meeting, EDC. This is it. So every unit that is permitted, you get a $3,000 payment per unit to the town. I thought it was 1,000, I was wrong, it was 3,000. So for instance, if there was a 200-unit mixed-use project that was approved in 2 phases, if the first 100 units are approved and the permits are issued, the town would receive a payment for $300,000 just for permitting those units. And then if the phase 2 wasn't yet, you would not get that incentive, but when that was approved and those units and were given the building permit, you would get an additional $300,000. So that's one of the huge incentives for that. The money goes to the town. This is something you wouldn't get without it.
Restrictions,
In terms of,
usage of that money?
that I would have to look into more, but I could check with our chief housing planner. I don't know that there are
It just
restrictions.
goes into the general fund.
I think it can.
Right.
I think the town, I would have to be clear.
But it's from the state.
It's from the state. It's from, I think, technically from the Smart Growth, I think, Trust Fund, where money is. So, and then here's the interesting thing. This is the other thing. 40S is a companion law that was enacted, which basically, the big concern is that if a lot of children move in, that the school costs will then actually eliminate the benefit. But what it does is it reimburses school districts for the gap between the product. It's a little complicated. I'm not even going to try to fully explain it, except this is an incentive for qualifying. Basically, you get reimbursed school costs if there's like a gap between the property tax payments generated by the 40R project for schools and the average per student cost, and then there's a big formula. It's really hard to explain. But it's only payable when the gap of the cost, this is the short way, educating it, for those students who live in there, is if it's half of the property tax plus excise tax, so if your cars that are in there, as well as state aid. But it's half of it. So if it exceeds that, for instance, so if the total cost to educate is $120,000, if it was 10 kids, it was $12,000. And the half of the property and excise and state aid, well, there's a typo, is $100,000 AOID, there would be a payment of $20,000. So basically, you can kind of think of it as like an insurance policy, should more children move in. But most of these developments tend to be like 1 and 2 bedrooms, so you don't get a lot of kids. You get some, but that's typically
So
what
the
happens.
point is, if you have a higher density development, because of the nature of 40B,
40R.
you don't have to be scared off by the potential that
Yeah.
higher density equals more kids, equals more stress on the educational system, eats into the reimbursement.
Exactly, or just in general raises the cost for the town. And that's even why we even factored that into the analysis, just to kind of give it a sense of what might happen. Because that is a lot of times the fear, but a lot of times it's not necessarily like the realistic fear. You're going to have more kids move in if you do a lot more single-family development, for instance. They tend to attract more children.
And that's not a one-shot deal, that's every year.
Well, the 40S, yeah.
Yes, it's every year. It's not just a one-time payment, it's every
Right.
year.
Yeah, like it's calculated every year, and then what the difference is that's how it works. So, for instance, in Greenbush, right now, the village business is an 80-acre district. If you did a 40R, you wouldn't even have to do the entire district. You could do the entire district, just depends on what the choice would be. If you had 20 acres of that was at a high density, like closest to the train at 400, you get 400 units. 20 acres in the closer maybe would be at 12 units an acre, 240 units, 48 acres at 8 per acre, 8 units, 384 units. That's a total. You get 1,000 units in that area. You would get a zoning incentive payment of $600,000 and a total bonus unit payment of up to $3.1 million. I mean, that's like just hypothetical. This is not what's going to happen. It's just a way to show the way this works. I mean, for instance, the demand is only 700 units right now. That you don't know if that's high or low, but that's what the demand shows right now. But that's the way it would work. So there are some significant advantages to exploring and going for a 40R. And then one of them is the design standards. So these are the things you'd be addressing within this. It's the scale, proportion, exterior appearance of the building, the placement, the alignment, the width, grade of street and sidewalks. You can do that. Not all of these have to be included, but they can all be included. The type and location of infrastructure that's going to be going, location of the building, garage entrances, so you can require the garages to be on the side. You can require, for like large units, you can say that it has to be in the corner, it has to be in the center. That's part of the design guidelines you can do. You can incorporate the protection of significant natural site features that even if they're not necessarily protected, you can actually do that. Location design for on-site open spaces, landscaping. So all of these things can be incorporated into the design guidelines, and then when the developer comes in, they have to meet them. So within reason, they can't be prohibitive of development. And that would defeat the purpose of going through the 40R anyway. So this is just Kingston. Kingston had a very detailed, it was more like a plan unit development that they did as a 40R, so their design guidelines were extremely detailed, whereas others, I actually brought a couple copies of one from Amesbury, where they actually incorporated just the design guidelines specifically right into the 40R guidelines itself, whereas what Kingston did is they had the 40R district, and then they had a supplemental design guidelines that it refers to. So there's just two different ways of doing it. Amesbury's are much more basic, whereas the Kingston example is much more specific. So you want to, for these, you would like, the idea is to actually get some significant design guidelines so that it really accomplishes, and really it helps you to achieve that desired character. If you don't put them in, you can still have a 40R, but they can be very basic, and then you're not going to have that same kind of control. So that's one way to look at that. In Plymouth, for example, this is just 2 pages that I found. So they have everything from actually like, they have more conceptual sketches, but then they even take different types of buildings and they talk about, you can't really read it, but they point, like for instance, like vertical, that house, the 3-story mixed use, and the second, on the one on the right, they talk about like vertically proportioned windows, decorative lighting on signage band. Like they talk about sign band visually separates commercial uses. You can actually talk about the signage and what type of signage that is allowed in this district, whether or not you can be like, backlit, or it has to be lit from the front. All of these things can be incorporated into the design elements. So it really, it takes some time, but it's really worth doing.
Do these communities mostly come up with these themselves, or do they oftentimes leverage or get some help from someplace?
It's a common, usually they get help from someone. Some communities have done it themselves, but it's typically done either through a consultant, or it's like MAPC will do them as well, because there's kind of an understanding of like the process and how it works. And it is kind of a 2-step process. You are doing just the district, but then the guidelines which are attached to it. So you are drafting a district. So for instance, when you're approving it, you can even send your district for like preliminary approval, understanding the design guidelines are currently being drafted. And then upon completion, then you have to get them for the final approval.
But they have to be in place before anything's built.
Yeah.
To be in effect.
The other thing is in order to do this, you either need an up-to-date housing production plan, which I know that you're redoing right now, so that's good. Or you need a master plan within the last 10 years. So you would be eligible for this. And that's a strong thing. The reason why, for municipalities, why it's good is that it does provide more diverse housing. You are below your 10%, so it's a way to achieve more. If a 40B project came in, for instance, they'd have the same 20% that they would be getting. And you would not necessarily, without a 40R, could get any of that incentive payment. The multiple incentives, obviously, is a good, I would say, motivation. It provides more local control by doing the design guidelines. You really do have control of what's getting built, but there's still some flexibility in it, so it allows developers to come in. It helps with infill upgrade. You're upzoning, essentially. Actually, here you're not really upzoning. The thing is, the only way you get the payments is if it's something that's not allowed by right. So even though you have the overlay, you still need a special permit. So therefore, the 40R still works because it would now be by right. If you had done the overlay as of right, 40R wouldn't have made sense here in that sense. Well, it could still make sense, but you wouldn't have gotten the same kind of bonuses, incentives, payments. So it can also help the commercial areas because it is the mixed use, and you can specify the types of uses that can be used. It can be, retail, office, residential. So that's really good. And it's collaborative. You do have to work with the community to do it.
And this can be individual to each 40R district, right?
Yeah, the interesting thing about 40R is that you can do it as small as one parcel, and you can do it as large as a district. I know Brockton, for instance, they did a 40R district. It's actually several small sub-districts. They're not even all attached, but it's one 40R district with sub-districts, and each of them have some different design criteria. Whereas I know Belmont did, I think, 2 parcels. I think it was an old church, and that's what they did, and then that's where they got their 40R. Reading has done a really large 40R that goes from their train station all the way into their the center of their downtown. They've gotten several developments that have actually been built there already. So it varies. It depends on how you want to go about it.
Does it work the same way in the sense that it's an overlay to the existing commercial or business zoning?
Yep, your underlying zoning stays. So if there's something you don't have to, like if someone comes in and it makes sense to the town and you think a larger commercial development only would make more sense, you can still do it. Because it's a bonus on top of what you can do under the underlying. So it's just like an overlay.
Mm-hmm.
It is an overlay, actually.
Okay.
So that's how it works. Another, just in terms of from the perspective of municipality, so it kind of assuages some concerns. So the location, this is voluntary. You're doing it, and it does require a 2/3 vote. The infrastructure has to be in place, so that's not something that has to be built. That's the only way you can do a 40R.
When you say infrastructure, what are you referring to?
Sewer and water.
Okay.
Really, that's because that's the main concern with density. The design standards really deal with the density and scale because if you're worried about something coming in and becoming this like big box, you can actually have a similar density and a better design that then brings it to much more of, I would say, a human scale. So that's where the designs, like you can require dormers, you can have like pitched roofs. Those are the things that will help. In the as of right zoning, what's interesting is that there's different things you can just change the zoning if you want, but you can keep the underlying zoning. That's the advantage here. So you don't have to go in and change everything. You're actually just adding something on top of it. And then there's just different ways you can kind of look at the way the modifications are done. It can be a project-specific basis. It can be through your site plan review. That's what you're going to work into your actual guidelines, what you would incorporate.
You're going to have time for questions, right?
Yeah, that's what I'm going to do in just 1 second.
Beginning to get like,
Okay,
and
I'm
I
sorry.
know you or
I think this is my
I
last
wanted
slide.
to talk about some other things in relation to this.
Yeah.
Okay.
This is my last slide, actually. Good job. So the reason why it's good for developers, and this is why a lot of these 40R districts do get development, is that the educational impact that really can be a pushback for larger developments is covered with the 40S. That's tied to this. So that's not even an issue, and that's something that can be addressed. It's already collaborative. The town has already worked for this with the design guidelines, and that's why the design and density is addressed up front. So that's really helpful. There has to be infrastructure, so the developer doesn't have to come and build new infrastructure because it's there. I mean, within their parcel they do, but not within, you're not going to have to come and put a new line in the street. It incorporates environmental and a range of community interests, and then it's expedited planning and permitting. It is by right. It's not, you're not going to go through a years-long process, so that's why it's good. So, thank you. I know it's a lot of information, so just with any questions anybody has.
Laura, you had some, I believe, right?
Well, not questions exactly, but I don't know, I'm trying to remember how in-depth we got talking about this at some of the meetings where it's come up. I think I filled you in that the EDC was talking about this, and it was similar to the village business, but somewhat different. And so we're really, we, Bill and I, at least, Bill Limbacher, have been talking about trying to bring this to town meeting in April. And to do that, I think you're going to need some buy-in from the business community. If this is proposed for Greenbush, which I think makes a lot of sense, but I certainly want to get your feedback on that, you could really target the business and property owners in Greenbush and invite them to a meeting. And Matt said he would be able to come back and make another presentation for them. So I guess I just want to hear, and I'm sure Matt and Chris do too, if you're all on board with this idea, or what you think about it, or if you have more questions about it, or if it's something you think we shouldn't do at all, or, just where you're coming down with it.
Well, Mr. Vogel?
This is great, sitting here for a change. First of all, so I guess my interest is in understanding this a little better so that we can sell it if that's the course of action we choose. And so I understand it's similar to the Village Overlay District that we already have. So one of the things I'd be interested in is discussing what is not similar, since I think we all understand fairly well the Village Overlay District. So what is different here that we maybe need to understand a little better? I understand the by right as opposed to by special permit. The special permit, of course, allows us to condition the development to our taste, if you will, or the taste of the community that we seek to represent here on this board. So if it's by right, I guess I'm interested to know how the development is controlled. I heard you say that you write the basic 40R parameters right into the regulations. And I guess my question would be, we get fairly detailed and specific for each particular development that we look at, and feel like we have a lot of control by doing that. How much of that control is sort of not there in the 40R scenario? So those are my two starting questions.
Well, that's, okay, the first one, what's different? The primary difference, obviously, is by right versus the special permit, so that's clear. The difference is that within the 40R is that you can have, right now you have the same, I would say, densities throughout the entire overlay. So you can go as high as 16 and then up to 20 with certain benefits and things like that. Here, with the 40R, you could do this with an overlay too, but you can actually have one 40R district with different sub-districts. So this actually also addresses one of the questions you had. If you had a sub-district that's a higher density, closest to the train station, the way that you would not have that project by project same control you have now, specifically. But in some ways, you would have just as much control in the fact that you are going to be codifying the actual design criteria for that sub area. So you would be able to determine the heights. You can even have things like, if you don't want everything to be uniform height, that like the adjacent buildings have to be a certain, different height.
We have regulations like that for the...
So, those things you can do. You can kind of talk about the materials when it comes to the sidewalks, the street trees. You can actually put that all into it, so that sub-district, the different projects have to at least abide by those specific parameters. You're not going to have one material that's going to be allowed, but if when you're going through the guidelines, for instance, and if brick is one of them, or like, clapboard siding, if those two compatible, those might both be allowed, and then therefore they would still work. You can require that, windows be along at the same level. So you're not going to have one thing where you have like giant windows on one and then totally out of line. That really breaks it. So there's different ways that you can really guide that within the actual design guidelines themselves. They can be very specific. I actually brought just two different examples. I brought the actual Kingston ones, and I also brought the Amesbury, so you can see, I'll leave these, I brought 2 copies of it so you can just pass it around, but you can see the difference. You can be very kind of minimal with your design guidelines, but you can also go more specific and
I'm pretty sure also that, I'm quite sure you can still put conditions on a 40R approval.
In terms of?
In terms of, this development shall follow this plan,
It has to be consistent
I will
with
check, but...
It does have to be consistent with your housing plan, for instance. It has to, different things that you can...
Yeah, but that's never a problem we've run into. I think
Right.
the problems
Right.
that the board has run into has been with proposals that are completely inconsistent with the housing plan. So that the development be, maybe be revised to be consistent with the housing plan might be a condition. Because a lot of times there's so much pressure to get that approval that, some of these basic requirements aren't always such basic requirements anymore. So we can talk about this after and get back to the board.
Yeah, and the
but
specifics.
I'm pretty sure you would
also
have to have
incentives
conditions.
You don't get.
Yeah, that's the other thing. The incentives are the big difference. So.
Sure.
So another way of
That-
looking at it,
that's
maybe
pretty
I'm being overly
straightforward.
simplistic, is there are not significant trade-offs relative to the current village overlay, but you do have the benefits of some significant incentives.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah, and so, I mean, some of the details I would have to look more into, and that would be something to work out. But yeah, the incentives is the big difference.
Just one more question.
Sure.
The towns that you've worked with and the towns that have adopted this, what was the difficulty, if you will, of the route to adoption? Was there resistance? How was it, obviously it was successfully overcome in many cases, but maybe there wasn't resistance. I'd be interested to know kind of anecdotally.
I think sometimes the resistance winds up being the by right element, but I think a lot of times the design criteria is what really does, I would say, convince people that there is the control. I haven't worked specifically with the communities. I know that on the process of adopting them, actually, I've only been with MEPC for 2 years. But that would be something I could easily ask my colleagues who've worked in these.
Yeah, I'd be interested to know strategies that people have used
Sure.
to present to their constituents and to sort of get to a consensus that this is the right thing to do.
Sure.
Yeah, because I think in our particular case, well, in many of the towns in Massachusetts, we have to go before town meeting and get the zoning changed. It's not like a city council that we have to convince, or I'm assuming Dedham, I don't know actually as a fact, but it's a larger city. I'm assuming they probably have a city council and a mayor, maybe.
They have a representative town meeting, actually.
Okay, so it's a little bit different. So yes,
Even a representative town
Yeah,
meeting
it is
is an easier
yeah,
situation than an open town meeting.
yeah.
I mean, I think when you're going to these situations, I think one of the strategies is getting information out there, packets of information that actually try to explain the key components in I would say, the most basic form to get the discussion flowing and really going. And the other thing would be to show other examples of where this has been done, in the projects that have actually come out of it. And then seeing what kind of incentive payments were, what did the towns do? Excuse me, how many units were allowed in these different sizes? Look for the right scale. I think that's one of the greatest kind of examples, and I would say look for communities where they've had one and then they've done another.
I think another thing, to answer your questions, is that if we do include the business community in the whole discussion, there's much more likely to be support.
Oh, yeah.
And they're the people who are going to directly benefit from it. That's how the Village Business Overlay District was passed. I mean, that was something at the time that was a little bit unusual
Yeah.
as far as density and Scituate and what people expected, and there was some resistance to that, actually, at
course.
all levels of town government, but it was adopted, and one reason was that there were property owners who were looking for something constructive to do with their property that would provide a higher density and more and the revenue to the town and the incentive payments are just kind of gravy for the town. But the state's interested in this because they want to see development in concentrated areas.
Right.
They want to see
Smart
it
growth.
near transit, all the smart growth. So those are the really, I think, sort of positive planning reasons to do this type of thing. And in particular, as we do have older people in the community that are going to want to downsize and have an apartment, not worry about maintenance, this kind of ties into some of
I
that.
think the predictability of it is really a selling point to the development community, because a lot of times special permits can be actually a detriment sometimes, because certain developers will avoid it. But if it is by right, but there are the design, they actually know exactly what is needed. So when they're making that proposal, they are designing it based within those guidelines that the town has worked through and set already. So it's kind of a lot of times what you're doing, and when you're doing a special permit, what are those characteristics that you're looking for? You're doing a very detailed set of design. Right now, there's some in there, but they are very basic. This would be far more specific. I mean, the design guidelines would be much longer than the actual document, and that's one of the things I think is really interesting when you actually see this Kingston one. This is a very long one, because it was a little bit more specific. It's well over 50 pages. Others I've seen have been like 20 to 30 pages, but they're literally talking about the roof lines, they're talking about the materials, they're talking about many different things. So and they're segmented typically in different types, so of design criteria. So you can follow it to the rule, and then it makes it an easier process. You do have to have an approval granting authority, so you'd have to determine who that would be. It could be you, it could be. Depends on, it could be the ZBA, it could be whoever decides to do it, but there is a process built into it. So that predictability is very, very attractive. That's in general zoning. I mean, that's the more predictable process, the better chance you have of getting what you're looking for.
And this addresses one of the other obstacles that we've seen, which is, a perception that Scituate is a difficult community to work with for some developers, right? So if this lays everything out in advance, it becomes a more streamlined, easier process for developers to work, doesn't it?
Yeah, the state, when it was first enacted, they didn't have like these nice guidebooks. What they've created now is they've got some nice guides of drafting their actual regs, and then also what you want to do in terms of the design and how you can craft that. So they've made it easier and for the communities to understand what to do. And now there's actually good examples. So you can see what's working, and you can look at what other communities have done and what might work for you, and that can help guide you for what you think would be really successful. I do think I think the incentive is really huge. Specifically, one of the charges when we started this planning process was looking for additional revenue as well. And given that there's not a huge commercial, this isn't a location where you're going to be able to really, up that percentage of commercial tax revenue. You're not going to go from your 90, I think it's 95.5% is residential. You're not even going to move it to 91. It'd be very hard to do. That would be like doubling or tripling the amount of commercial you have now. So that's really hard. So looking for other ways to generate revenue is also a good solid strategy here.
Is the way the legislation was crafted and worded for this program, does it give you a sense that it's going to continue indefinitely? In other words, you say these incentives are available every year from now on forever?
I don't think you can answer forever.
No, I understand that.
I think for the long term, yeah.
But the answer is
It'd be hyperbolic.
there's no identified endpoint.
And if it
It's
ever
not
went
1 year,
away,
5 year, 10 years.
if it ever went away, then you would reduce some zoning. I mean, if the 40R program went away, then there wouldn't be a 40R district, so you'd revert to your underlying zoning.
Yeah, okay.
That's the way I look at it.
Yeah, interesting. All right, somebody else.
Anne, do you have any particular questions?
I think it's, a 40R is something that we have been working toward through our overlay district for quite some time. And I think that as this MAPC study has pointed out, the population is getting older. And gone are the days when then those of us boomers don't want to live out in the West End anymore and have no place to walk to. We want to be able to be, I think, around a transportation center, of being able to walk to get some groceries, to be able to go to the dry cleaners, there's a bank, there are these amenities. I think that this is something that we can certainly work through. And as Laura has pointed out, we involve the stakeholders, that they are vested in this and that it is the wave of the future. And not be afraid of children that may or may not come to the development. My biggest concern would be not the district itself, not the commercialization, et cetera, but years ago, when we tried to do this with the planned development district with the golf courses right now, there originally was scheduled 20,000 square feet of retail space, and the harbor went ballistic. So somehow we have to figure out how to market this in such a way that it is a win-win for both Greenbush, because that's what we're aiming to do, and it is a win for the harbor as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's also even identified within the study. There's different opportunities. for the different village areas as well. I mean, this would be much more of a commercial center, a higher density, and really transit-oriented. I mean, that's the goal here. The harbor has the various amenities. Obviously, it has the harbor. That's a very unique draw. It has the more specialty shops. There'd be some probably specialty shops, but a different type that would locate in a place. You would definitely see probably more convenience retail here because of the presence of the train station and the commuters that are here. Not to mention that it's just a highly trafficked road. And those are the types of things that actually aren't in the harbor. I mean, with the exception of CVS, and there's not those things you just really typically just drop in. There's the market, which is great, but that's not what you'd be putting here either. So I think there's very different types of uses that would be going here than would be likely to locate in the harbor. But I think that's also part of the marketing strategy, and that's why one of the key, actually, we lead off with marketing. Marketing is crucial, but not just marketing like, oh, come to Scituate. It's marketing spaces. Really, some really successful towns, what they do is they have, even on their website, they'll have a listing. One of them, I just think Newton, because I worked in Newton, but when there's a vacant space, it's actually listed on their website. So when there's someone interested in town, they can see that. They'll know they'll know who the contact person is. So it takes even especially for small businesses, when you're a huge retailer, you have your search, retail search consultant who's looking for the right location. If you're starting your own business, you're doing it yourself. Maybe finding a broker. But if you're just even researching that opportunity, that's the way you can help to attract those smaller businesses. And that's the way. So you could have this is what's in the harbor. This is what's in Greenbush. This is what's in North Scituate. This is what's in Hummerock. That's a really good strategy. So it can't be just one pronged. You have to be looking at this really holistically, because every little thing, one thing that I think is interesting about an economic development plan is you forget that every part of it is economic development. It's getting the residents to live here to support the actual base industries, to support actually the train. It's a huge investment. The more people you can get here and utilize it, it's a better investment for the state, but also for the town. That's how you benefit from that state investment. So.
Yeah, I think Newton is a good example because I think they've done a very good job marketing their villages. And they actually say it's the town of, now I want to say it's at 11 or is it 9 villages? But anyway, each one has its own separate identity, which is quite nice.
And that's actually how they do their website. They actually list the villages and what's available in them. And you have it, in a different way, but you have that village dynamic here. You have these historical areas that have been centers. You're not creating them. Greenbush is more creating, it's been Greenbush, but that's your opportunity here. So that's why it's a very different market than what you would do even in North Scituate. Once you can get the sewer there, it's going to be a different type of village. But this is your chance to have a larger one. And the interesting thing is it's not in a high density populated area too, where there's going to be a huge, all of a sudden there's, a single family huge development that's going to be abutting in a lot of it. So it's a unique opportunity. It's kind of buffered naturally. So you can actually get some interesting development.
Can we go back? I'm sorry.
No. Just some basic points. One, part of the appeal, I think, would come is you kind of almost have the ground rules laid out for the development, so that we try to do big things, too many changes at town meeting, and that's too much, forget it. Whereas this, they would say, we're describing the type of clapboard, the shingles, so the people will be more prepared for what's going to be there. I think everyone knows that we need some more tax revenue and wants to see that, but at least if we can kind of say, we're opening this area up for this type of development, and we lay it out as how things are going to be, and they're going to say, somebody's going to put in, a Walmart or whatever in there. They're going to have that, call it a comfort factor of knowing, no, it's going to be a small, resident mixed use kind of thing, and here's the way it's going to look. They can kind of picture that in their heads, as opposed to, let's see what we get kind of thing, which will turn people off, I think.
Well, and I do think that's a really good point in the sense of the Village Business Overlay District. Now that people are familiar with it, we went to was it the last town meeting or the town meeting before? Anyway, we went to expand it. And it's, I shouldn't say it sailed through, but people were very supportive of it because they understood it. It'd been around for a few years, and that, like you said, they were familiar. They said, let's increase it. And
So the MEPC study that Matt's been helping us with, was really started with an eye toward economic development. But, this is you can see how this study can be a real help to selling things like the zoning that we're talking about, this 40R, because it has some really insightful commentary about what the town's looking for. And there's a lot of objective statistics in there, So things like the fact that the population is aging, the fact that, the housing trends are going to be changing as a result. I mean, that's objective and it's fact. So, when it comes to planning, when it comes to economic development, those are statistics that we can use to explain the benefits of this. It's been very clear, and we've made a number of efforts at outreach to the population. We've conducted surveys through the EDC. We hosted an open house where we socialized, I think, the first 2 phases of this study to help us build out this third phase. It's very, very clear that the culture of the village, that it's important to people, and people don't want another CVS to go up by mistake. And so that's in this study, and it's very consistent. And so, when you take some of the facts out of this study, I mean, I'm just pointing out it's a great example of how we can use this study and some of the data and input that's in there to help us create the story around why a 40R, is right for this town.
And I just have a couple quick questions, and just to reiterate, so what the proposal or recommendation is right now just for Greenbush, for the 40R district, correct?
Yeah.
And the second question I had, it was sort of along Bob's lines, is that we've had situations where we've gone through, and on paper, a particular bylaw looks fantastic, but then we find out after the fact that there were some unintended consequences that sort of slipped through. So my question, I'll put you on the hot seat, through these other towns, has there been any unintended consequences that have been maybe negative or not, that have popped up that weren't anticipated at the beginning? I'm just curious. Because it sounds really good.
Don't know off the top of my head. I am sure there are. I mean, there's always some examples of that. That's another thing I could check around. I've heard more about the successful developments that have occurred. I'm just thinking, sometimes I've heard something like a color might not be right or something, but those are things you can then build into the guidelines. So I think it's about being clear.
Right.
But I haven't heard anything specifically, unfortunately.
And talking about your guidelines, I mean, we do have a design review committee, and I'm not sure how that would still play into this, I would assume.
Well, I think they wouldn't have to make so many subjective decisions. There would be more like,
guideline
this
or a
is the roof
booklet.
pitch that's supposed to be. These are the materials that are supposed to be, check, check, check. It would be more like.
Be more like confirming the fact that it was matching the guidelines.
As opposed to right now,
Yeah,
it's sort of a
Adhering to the
suggestion.
guidelines.
They might be
Yeah.
very good at doing, or we have architects.
Like you said, color, I mean, someone could propose pink shingles, and right now, the design review committee could say, well, we don't believe that's correct, but there's nothing really forcing them not to have
Right.
pink shingles.
Yeah, so I mean, you can bring that specificity in. It can't be one color, you have to have one material.
Well, that was just a bad
No,
example.
I know.
Can't do it
But
anytime.
I just like to be clear, there has to be flexibility within it, but it's the flexibility that you as a community decides is the right flexibility. That allows the developer to still come in and create what they're looking to do, but that fits the community's vision for it as well. So it's like a nice checks and balances, I think, the way you can look at that, so. And
So-
one thing.
I'm
Yeah.
sorry, I just don't want to kind of lose track of time, and I know kind of time is getting short, but one thing I think when you're all done, before you leave, we should try to bring up the map of Greenbush again and look at where we have had some discussion about this, the EDC's had discussion about it, and the planning board's had discussion about it, but if we go to Greenbush,
Do you want just this map? Or that?
just, that one is okay, that one's great. I think what the recommendation is for is, a good place to start, is if you look at the red area, that's really prime for mixed use and transit-oriented development. And that's also the gateway into Scituate from 3A. So that seems like that would be the prime area to rezone. And the only thing that, you might want to think about, I think it's over, maybe you do have it,
Yeah,
over here is that medical building.
Which is residential right
It's
now.
residential. I don't believe it's in the Village Business Overlay District.
It's not, yeah.
Then you've got, some properties here that are not in the Village Business Overlay District. you've got some development going on here, but it's been kind of a slow pace, and, maybe that's the way it should be, but that's not necessarily the best thing for the town. So you've got this whole area, you've got these parcels that were just included in the Village Business Overlay District here. This here, I believe, that's also the end of the parking lot.
Yeah.
So I think it would pretty much correspond to an area like that for one idea of where might be a good start. But I think it's important to kind of zero in on that, if possible, right now, certainly with some plenty of room to make changes, but I think you need to start with a little more of a fleshed out idea so that we can get this thing moving and have something to say when the business people come in as far as, what you're proposing. So, I don't know if you want to, kick that around for a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, so right now, the recommendation, we have something before us, but that would not be the 40R, but it wouldn't necessarily matter.
This is the 40R. This is exactly, kind of along the same lines that we've all been talking about.
Right, but I guess
you have to define a location.
But your location is to the east side of the train tracks.
Well, actually, what you could do.
Yeah.
This would be the interesting thing. So I think this could be one of those advantages when you do a sub-district 40R, where you could have multiple districts. So you could have that red district would have certain density requirements, and then you could still have the orange area, the mixed-use neighborhood, in the 40R district, but with a different level, with some different guidelines and some different density requirements. Because that's the advantage of it, is that you don't it's not a one-size-fits-all district. You can have different subsections or sub-districts within it that allow for varying densities. Like as was saying, it could be, you want to zero in on exactly where you want to focus certain types of development that would at least get the incentive. You could have 3, you could have 4 sub-districts. It just depends. That would be the idea. I think we'd have to map out maybe some options. I think that would be the best way of where those districts are, get some agreement on what should be included in the 40R.
I think the problem is that we don't have a lot of time.
Yeah.
The next meeting that you have on Tuesday, the 25th, you've got things going from 7:30 to about 9:45. So you're not going to have time to talk about this again, which is why I'm hoping that we can reach some kind of loose conclusions at least tonight.
I have a thought that the easiest thing to explain to the town as a whole would simply be, especially since at the last town meeting, we voted to extend the Village Overlay District in this area, in the Greenbush area, to simply say we're changing, if you will, the Village Overlay District in Greenbush into a 40R district.
And then
Period.
sub-district it?
And
There's no reason to get any more complex than that, it seems to me.
I think that would have some real advantages to it because frankly, the 40R may be a little bit less attractive in some ways to developers. It's more in some ways and less in others. It's more in getting the by right approval, easier and quicker potentially.
Right.
It's less in that there are a couple more affordable units they have to put up, and that means that
And
there's a little
potentially-
less money, for them,
Right.
revenue-wise, out of the whole project.
and
But on the other
potentially-
hand, they may save money
Yeah.
on the permitting.
The guidelines may, for instance, cause them to have a more expensive design.
That's possible.
Potentially,
Yeah,
That's why you want to be
possible.
realistic with your designs. Think about what you would be doing on your own through the special permit, and what is it really acceptable, and then really incorporate that level into your design guidelines. But I think that would be a good way, taking the existing district and then maybe starting with that, and then maybe looking at where there could be some sub-districts within it, just to maybe have some of that variation. That would be a really good way to go, and actually that kind of aligns to the way this is even drawn out, where you're kind of focusing different types of development at different densities within it.
Right. And
That would be good.
at some later point, once we have some successes under our belt within it, you could always expand the district, if that was the
Right.
the need,
If it worked.
yeah.
Or
But-
refine.
Refine, exactly. But I like that, it seems very simple, and people have a good grasp of what that, hopefully a good grasp of what that, the overlay district now entails boundary-wise.
Yeah.
And we seem to have approval at the last town meeting for that. and there wasn't a lot of negative discussion that I remember about that. It seemed to be pretty positive, so that I certainly would support that.
Great.
And I think in general, oh, I'm sorry.
I was going to say, that comes back to my first question, that we should really understand the differences between a business overlay district zoning and a 40R and be able to explain those simply and rationally and concisely and make our points.
I think we could make a little comparison sheet, and
Yeah, I
we'll
think that's
also
good.
find out about the conditions and the ability to put conditions on it.
Right.
Which would be required, we'd have to do that with the application process anyway.
Yep.
Figure it all out.
Yep.
That'd be good.
Well, and again, I just wanted to say, I think, well, we can, if there's someone that disagrees with me, but I think this board sees the advantages of the 40R district, and that's why I was kind of asking, are there any negatives? Because it's certainly on paper, and what you've presented seems like a very good step forward in the right direction of what Situate's looking for, especially for this particular area. So I think most of us, again, I can't speak for everyone, but knowing the other individuals, I would think that this would be a very positive step forward, and that we would support it in any way possible.
Great.
So,
And the one project that is going through the planning board is grandfathered. I mean, they have
Right.
been very
in more than one way.
proactive. Well,
Well, I'm
they
kidding, I'm
have,
kidding. Okay,
they have zoning grandfathering.
yes,
Right.
So,
Right.
yes. But Matt and Chris, thank you so much for, this was
Very, very excellent.
one of the highlights of my evening, I'm sure.
Thank you.
But,
Great to have an
Thank
you very
opportunity to
much.
talk about it.
It's
Pleasure.
very informative, and again, reading through this, I mean, obviously, you can see that there's been a lot of work and a lot of thought that have gone into all the phases of this report. And I think it's going to be very beneficial moving forward in not only this, but many other areas of town. So kudos to both of you for your work on this. It's been excellent.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
And I brought a couple of copies of like the Amesbury versus just if you wanted to look through to see the
Yeah,
differences.
leave those with you.
thank you.
And I marked where the design guidelines are in the Amesbury one.
Right,
Thanks.
Thank you.
You both.
thank you.
And you can leave your laptop if you'd like.
I'm actually here. These are just these are the 40
Break down the percentage.
Oh, great,
Explains
great.
Very eye-opening.
the legislation itself as well as the handbook and the design guidelines.
I think I had actually circulated this around several meetings ago, but here it is. This is the actual legislation for 40R.
Oh,
so
okay.
If
Okay.
you don't want it,
Pass
that's
that
okay
down.
too.
Yeah.
Don't want to prop up your
Yeah.
I'll take one, if you don't mind.
So-
No, I may read it online or something, it's
Yeah,
not.
just to move that. I'm sure it's on. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks again, Matt.
Driftway Park, I think, would be a conference center, hotel, you know, you get 3 floors.
Next week.
Across the way.
I won't be here next week. I can't be here next
That's
week.
something I can talk to Laura, maybe she can talk to Matt, something.
It's the city or the town of Scituate owns it, so it could be an RFP if we got enough, but that's, I think, another can of worms.
Well, there's plenty of these actually down there.
Oh, is there?
I feel
Okay.
left out.
All right, we are a little bit behind, but it's 9:10 PM, and the next item on the agenda is a Form A for Longley Road. So would the applicant like to come forward and explain what they'd like to do?
The plan you have before you shows 2 lots, which is our registered land. One lot is in the left side, and the other one is a special permit, which was approved 2 years ago. It'll be recorded with the land court, and once they take it in, they'll approve the proposed certificate of title, so the lots are.
So, again, on the plan, could you point out?
Yeah, which of these are the lots?
Yeah, no.
Lot B and C are gonna be combined together. There's a
B.
C line between
C.
B and C.
So that to be removed?
Any line here. So B and C will be combined to create the special permit lot, which has to be at least 20,000 square feet.
Mm-hmm.
And then Lot A is the 10,000 square foot lot. We're combining Lot E and F on that. And then we can line court the
And what happens to D?
D is not part of this deal?
No, I'm sorry, lot B, C, and D.
Oh, okay.
Okay, okay.
Okay.
So this is one large lot right here,
Right now.
Yeah, right now.
and this is the second one.
These lots are all being combined and recombined, and there's only
Okay.
2 lots.
So one's a 50-foot frontage
This one
lot.
here, and
Okay,
this one back
And
here.
then this one's a conforming lot.
It's 100 by,
That goes to Route 20.
Got it.
And this
Oh,
one,
okay. I know
they
what
have the
you're
zoning
saying.
approval
So, yeah,
already.
okay.
Yep.
And we
Yep.
have that,
Yep.
so.
there's a note.
So here you are.
We really appreciate that
Oh,
detail. We appreciate that detail. Thank you.
So normally, I guess Bill always asks Laura if there are any issues, but you kind of already said that it seemed to be okay.
Streets.
Yep, both the lots have approved frontage on Longley Road, which
Yeah.
is public, and it's constructed in this area. It's constructed all the way across,
Oh, yeah.
yeah, so,
Yeah, these are also on town sewer.
Okay.
okay, great.
Yeah, I'm like,
So you can ask for a motion if you
are there any questions? Bob, do you have
No, I'm
any?
good.
Ann?
Nope,
Bob?
nope, pretty straightforward.
Okay, do we have a motion?
Move to endorse.
Oh, okay, well, we have our little thing.
Oh, you have a little thing to read?
Yeah, we have a thing.
All right then.
Very organized.
I move to endorse as approval under the subdivision control law not required, a plan of land in the town of Scituate, Mass. Longley Road, stamped by Paul Joseph Marabito of Ross Engineering Company, Inc., for applicant owner Benjamin Goulston, trustee of GAG Realty Trust and SLC Realty Trust, dated 7/16/14, as the division of land is not a subdivision because every lot shown on the plan has frontage of at least the distance presently required by the Scituate zoning bylaw on the public way of Longley Road with the 50-foot frontage special permit issued by the Zoning Board of Appeals on March 14th, 2011.
Do I have a second?
Second? Oop, second.
All those in favor?
Aye?
Aye.
And for signing these, is it? Okay,
You can have mine.
okay. So I'm going to put those up there. All right. The next item on the agenda is Form A for 24 Gardner Road. The applicant, please state your name, Mr. Morse, and come forward and explain what you'd like to do.
For the record, Gregory Morse, representing the property owners, Brian and Christine Matera. We're here with a Form A plan to merge 2 lots together. It's shown on the assessor's map, parcel 413, which is their existing lot, and the abutting parcel 414. Combined, the lot in its entirety will have 1.37 acres, 60,000 square feet. This is in the 20,000 square foot R2 zone. It results in a total of 300 feet of frontage on Gardner Road, which is an accepted road of the town. There are 0 new lots being created here.
And it's really just to consolidate the lots, that they're not buildable. Laura?
Yep, no issues, it's not creating any new buildable lots.
Yeah, but where is Gardner Road? Oh, it's way up.
Off of Border Street.
Okay, yeah. That's always the, well, I
Yeah,
think I've told
almost-
you about this. There's somewhere supposedly on a map, there's a Nebraska Avenue that appears on some maps and not on other maps, but it's right near there.
It's out-
It's
it's
off
out
of Wood
there.
Island Road.
Yeah, it's right there.
Anyway, Bob, do you have any?
No?
No, pretty
Ann?
straightforward.
No.
Bob, too?
Bob, two all set, yeah. No,
All right, thank you, Greg. I think we have a motion.
I move to endorse as approval under the subdivision control law not required, a plan of land in Scituate, Mass. Showing parcels 413 and 414 being combined at 24 Gardner Road, stamped by William Joseph McGovern of Morse Engineering Company, Inc., for applicant owners Brian W. and Christine M. Hotarek, dated 10/21/14. The division of land is not a subdivision because every lot shown on the plan has frontage of at least the distance presently required by the Scituate zoning bylaw on the public way of Gardner Road.
Do I have a second?
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Greg. Right, okay. The next item on the agenda is a Form A for 179 Edward Foster Road. Would the applicant please come forward and state your name again, Paul?
Ross Engineering Company. The plan you have before you was endorsed previously by the board in December of last year. And the purpose of this plan, again, is to send it to the land court, to parcel, which is the registered portion of the property shown on the plan. The land court has reviewed it, we went out and resurveyed the property for them according to the rules and regulations, and they're all set to approve it once you endorse the plan.
Laura?
No particular issues. It's a recombination of land on Edward Foster that I believe the board approved, some time ago, and, no particular issues.
So just help me understand, what was the difference for what we approved? Why are you coming back
You
again?
approved back in December were two things. You approved Lot B, which is a 10,000 square foot lot, as a
Right.
matter of right. But then, after the night we came in here, Lot A was not approved by the Board of Appeals. That's a 50-foot lot.
Mhm.
So what you did was you held on to the Mylar until we got approval for Lot A from the Board of Appeals, and then you endorsed the plan. So once that was done, and on that plan you signed in December, we did show 6 and 7 being divided. 6 and 7 was one land court lot with Lot 5. So the numbers go in sequence. The next one was 6 and 7. So once we knew we had the approval of the lots here, we still have to go back to land court in order to put that line down between 6 and 7. And by signing this plan, this plan will go back into the land court, and from there they'll prepare a decree plan. And certificates of titles can be issued, because 6 is going to go with Lot A, and 7 will go with Lot B.
Any questions, Bob? Bob one?
Yeah, really, and the fact that neck narrows down to 20 feet before it gets to the buildable part of the lot, that's not a problem.
Yeah, Lot B is at least 10,000 square feet by itself.
Right.
So the purpose of this is to give them access to the beach.
Oh, to the beach, I'm sorry, I'm looking at this in the wrong direction.
Yeah, this is,
This is Edward Foster Road,
Yeah,
so you've
it's
got
kinda
your frontage.
Yeah.
Got it, sorry, yes, I'm good.
Ann, any questions?
No, I knew it looked familiar, but yeah, no,
I know.
I understand why.
Yeah, now it's funny, when I look at the locust map and everything, and I was
Yeah.
like, okay, yeah, I got it. Okay. Do we have a motion?
I move to endorse as approval under the subdivision control law not required, a plan of land in the town of Scituate, Mass., located at 179 Edward Foster Road, prepared by Ross Engineering Company, Inc., for Ryan D. Whitney, dated October 1st, 2014, as the division of the tract of land shown is not a subdivision because it shows a proposed conveyance or change in lot line which does not alter the existing frontage as required under the Scituate zoning bylaw.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, Paul.
All right, thank you.
The attorney for the applicant, they were saying the land court in the morning. Is it possible to have the plan endorsed tonight, or?
Yeah, sure, well,
Sure.
no, you're,
I mean, what time do you need it in the morning? Can you get it at 8:30 in the morning?
Oh, sure, that's fine.
Oh, yeah, so then we'll have it.
oh, so I can sign it tonight, and then you can come in tomorrow morning? Does that work for you?
Sure.
All right.
Coming in, or is the attorney?
Probably me.
Okay.
All right, thank you, Paul.
Okay, great.
I appreciate it. Now, do we have, is this the Scituate Country Club? I think.
Justin get back on that
Yeah.
and do that later.
Oh, is this the, oh, yeah, the four
Is that
more condo
from-
units, right?
So we have at 9:15, we're a little behind schedule, not too bad.
Not at all.
5 minutes. We have an informal discussion on the Scituate Country Club, so why don't you introduce yourselves for the record again, and just tell us what you're thinking about and what you'd like to do.
Okay, thank you. My name is Paul Marabito from Ross Engineering Company. I'm here with Richard Bohanec, who's the president of the Homeowners Association for the condominiums at Scituate Country Club. And the reason we're here this evening is what they were going to do. This is their parcel, or Lot A.
Right?
That was approved back by town meeting back in the late 70s as part of the PUD zoning bylaw, which included Widows Walk as well. Part of that zoning bylaw was to allow housing both around Widows Walk, which was never built, but also on this side of the Driftway, there was provision for a total of 40 units of housing. And the number of units was based upon the land area that each parcel had. What that meant was there were 36 built here, there's 4 over in this area here. So there's 36 here and 4 over here, which were built. The zoning bylaw called for 40. What they would like to do is to build an additional 8 units over here, shown on the blue area. These are all existing, and this is the driftway. This is
Right.
the driving now.
Yeah.
Everything's on town sewer, and they're proposing to take one of these and reconstruct under one like kind in this area here. The issue is that the bylaw called for a total of 40 based upon their land area, and based upon that, there were 36 allocated for this district and this lot. So what we're looking for is the planning board to support this, by going to town meeting. The bylaw would have to have a simple change to allow this particular section of the sub-district to have a total of 44 as opposed to 36.
So at town meeting, you're proposing that the planning board would submit or you're planning to submit that change, right?
Submit it, but you would have to review it and report back to town meeting because there'd be a change in the zoning bylaw.
That's usually done after a public hearing where you hear all sides, and if there's any other points of view, you would hear them all.
Right.
and
So
then
this
you-
right now is just sort of preliminary,
Yeah.
kind of getting us a feel, of what, giving you a feel of how we think about that.
They've got ample room to put that in here, you can see it.
What is there right now? Is it just trees? Is it woods?
Trees in the woods.
So the intent would be, if everything goes smoothly, to put this before the April town meeting?
Yeah,
Laura?
they can do that. They need to get a petition together. You can get one from the town clerk. You would have to get 100 signatures. She says, she always recommends that you get extras because they have to validate every single one of them. So you get like 110 signatures of Scituate residents. If you have couples in most of the units, that's probably like 70 right there. And then you just need 30 more. So, everybody's friends and relatives that live in Scituate can sign this, and then you'd bring it into the town clerk and into us, sometime in the not-too-distant future, so we could get it on the advertisement for the zoning articles. And I think we do charge some amount of money towards the legal ad. It's not going to be a whole lot.
So what is the timing of that, Nora? Is that something that we have to do?
I think I have that with me.
Is it in December?
I would say you could probably wait a little bit beyond that, but not too
The
far.
warrant opens December 4th. It
December
closes-
4th.
It closes, I think, the 16th.
That's what I thought.
It would
Yeah.
have to be,
So all the signatures would have to be in before?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, thanks, yeah.
you got to find out from the town clerk, she might have a different date, but the warrant is only open that short period of time.
Paul, with the little exposure you've had to this proposal, do you see any engineering difficulties? There's soils, grades, traffic,
Everything's on town
utilities.
sewer.
Yeah.
have a storm drain system. We did the original engineering project. We got storm drains in there. Little ways, because then it goes into
Yeah, you kind of come up and it levels off once you get in there, right? Yeah,
it.
Topography's okay,
This is the higher part of the property.
Yeah.
So there's
no ledge,
no ledge,
no wetlands, obviously.
It's pretty straightforward.
What's the advantage to the homeowners association of having the 8 additional units?
Well, the big advantage is, we've looked at it a number of different ways. Some of the other units are at a point in time where we have to reshingle the units, and the road's starting to buckle. And, you know, we had a couple lampposts come down on us that we had to put back in place. So it's a matter of raising some funds without doing an assessment. That would allow us to take some profit from the sale of those units, and to be able to do a lot of the work that needs to be done on the units around the other buildings, which would be beneficial to the owners and really to the, you know, the association.
Right.
And it would probably pretty much eliminate some of the long-term requirements for larger reserves to worry about reshingling and, you know, repaving and a number of the other things. So we re-roofed all the total buildings 2 or 3 years ago, and that's good for 25 years. So if we can do this in conjunction with putting the building up, it would be really beneficial. Plus, we're looking at it and saying, you know, we're going to be adding 8 more units to the tax base of the town.
And you'd also have 8 more units to spread your assessment around over.
Hopefully, it wouldn't be an assessment.
Well,
Well, there-
or your condo dues,
The
whatever, you-
condo
what-
fees.
Yeah.
We'd be able
I
to
meant the
spread that around
monthly.
8 more, which would
Right,
make a lot of people.
because there's not a lot more infrastructure that's being created to do this project, really.
And, you know, it'd be really taking everything we have in place now, and when you look at the support of the infrastructure, would be very minimal to support those other units.
Right. So the homeowners association would essentially be the developer.
Now, there are a number of ways of cutting this. I don't think we want to be the developer.
Okay.
There's a lot of risk. We'd like to be able to look at it and give the rights to a contractor and the developer to put the units up and work with them, you know, in a partnership, but not necessarily take on the development.
Okay.
And my assumption, but I shouldn't assume, is that the architecture would be very similar, if not almost identical, to what's existing
It
there?
has to be identical.
Okay.
It has to look exactly the same on the outside. Now, the inside units could be changed. Well, you know, when you look at the 36 units that are there today, every one of them, over the 25 years, the individual owners have changed them one way or another.
Mhm.
And so they would be different, but on the outside, they would look exactly the same.
I wonder why a building wasn't put there originally. I mean, it looks so balanced with that building there.
You know, it's a good question. We asked that 100 times.
Did you really?
Yeah.
I know there was a lot of controversy from the Third Cliff about various aspects of, you know, the country club. I'm not sure about the condos so much, but, you know, I know there were some feelings there. I'm pretty sure would that be under the North River Commission, Paul, where that is located?
Just by way of history, the planning
300
board
feet back,
approved
right?
them. Pardon?
It's 300 feet back from the,
Yeah, the clubhouse, this is the clubhouse right here.
Yeah.
Familiar with? When we first went to the planning board approved these 36 units right along the ridge. Now, they're not approved, but then the letters appealed it.
Yeah.
Oh, and then got moved over?
To court, the town prevailed, and we were all set to start to do the work for the construction. The owners called us and said, we think we want to put them across the street.
Yeah.
We went through the whole process again, and they approved it. The concern they had was, and there was some controversy, there's a well down here, and the concern was that any fertilizers or anything they used would contaminate the well. What the town didn't know was that, and this came up at the last meeting, we got the letter from the DPW where the state ordered that well to be capped because of the pollution. The groundwater from the fill that was put in this area here from the debris supposedly it came from out of Scully Square when the River and Mule project was taking place in the 60s.
Wow.
So because that well was kept, that concern was no longer an issue in the planning board.
They brought it down on the same barges that they took the
Yeah, I
sand
was
down
gonna
on.
say.
Yeah, to the Boston Sand and Gravel.
Round trip.
I would bet that that particular design generated from the desire to have as many units as possible overlooking the golf course. So, instead of putting them on the far side of the road.
When the zoning was drawn up, I was involved in that process, because I was on the board then. It was based upon the land area that was available. And the
Yeah.
golf course was the largest parcel. Around Widows Walk, up along the upper ridge, there were 250 townhouses proposed.
Yeah, yeah.
Then the owner, Mr. Whittemore, wanted some housing on a country club, because he had a full-blown subdivision approved for this side here. The board convinced him that he'd be better off keeping the golf course and have some housing here, because he could rework the greens and the fairways, which he did.
Mhm.
There were fairways in here.
Right, exactly.
There's also a tunnel proposed underneath the driftway, so you could play a widow's walk and go down the tunnel, come over here and play nine-hole.
Wow. That would have been interesting. That's a long tunnel.
I'm not crazy about tunnels.
You don't want to walk that course, you want to have a cart.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Paul, you had mentioned that there were 36 units, if I believe the figures you said, 36 units built, but you said 4 others? Where were the 4 others?
They're built in this area.
But they were built, but not as townhouses, right?
No,
No.
no, the townhouses were going to be along the upper rim of the proposed golf course, which is now Widow's Walk.
Uh-huh. Oh.
Those were never built.
Okay. So, but those, I guess, I've driven there, those are townhouses, the current ones, 36 units, aren't they? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
But it was 36 sort of townhouse units and then 4 single-family houses, okay. So, Laura, do you have anything to add?
No, I think that's a good start for, where things might go with this. If they do bring the petition in, then we'll make sure that it's in the public hearing and, gets to the selectmen and all that stuff. So we will kind of walk it through the system.
Okay. Bob?
Looks perfectly logical to me.
Ann?
Straightforward, makes sense. Like you said, it almost feels like
fits.
he completes the project.
Fits.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
my only question would be, well, my first question, you already answered it, is usually it's the people that are next door that maybe have the biggest issues with it. So obviously, it's coming from the homeowners association. You've eliminated that. That's great. But the other parcels that are along, what's that street?
Gilson.
Gilson, thank you. Those 3, looks like 3 or 4 parcels. Have you, well, not so much those, but the ones at the very low.
Top side of
If you keep
Gilson.
moving your finger down, Paul?
Yeah, that's sort of.
The other way.
The other way
way,
down,
Paul.
other way down.
Down.
Right
Right
there,
side.
right there. Have those been contacted? Because it'd be to the back of those
Yeah.
parcels. I would just maybe suggest that you have kind of an informal discussion with the abutters to see how they feel about it.
Yeah, these are the homes on the upper part of Gilson Road.
Right.
Yeah.
And
And right on the corner there, there's that, it's a, well, I think it is a fairly new house that he built, like the porch in the back and the,
Huge.
yeah,
from here, the land slopes all the way down to Penn Street.
right.
Yeah.
I just think there might be some abutter issues, or maybe there isn't, but it might be nice just to have an informal discussion with the people that would probably be most affected, because that would be in their backyards. I think it's probably all trees now, but still, it would be in their
I
backyards.
think-
Do you have to get any kind of a butter sign off or anything?
Oh, there'll be a public hearing.
Yeah, there's a public hearing,
Right,
but
right.
the abutters aren't specifically notified.
Okay, so it's just,
But that's not to say that they won't hear about it.
Right,
Yeah.
and,
so it would be in the public hearing, if anything, that the butters would come to.
but I think you need to be proactive.
Yeah.
And I really think that you need to take a Saturday morning and invite them for coffee and donuts and explain everything that you're going to do, because knowledge is power. And if they don't know what's going on, rumors get started, things happen, you need to have these people on your side. So if you're proactive about it and give them, like Eddie McLaughlin used to do, coffee and donuts, it seems to work, if that's what you want.
Yeah, I second that. I think that Ann's absolutely correct, is that if you're proactive about it and you diffuse any potential, not that there even is, but any potential opposition, it goes so much easier, and it'd be easier to get the petitions, and then easier at town meeting, and so forth. But as far as from this board, it seems really straightforward, and, I certainly appreciate the extra density that it has, and it seems like it should have probably been there from the beginning, as others have mentioned. So,
Okay, great.
So just to repeat again, we'll just get it, we need to get 100 signatures, the town clerk can provide us with a format. And
Yeah.
it needs to be in by the 16th.
And you need the exact language that you want on the warrant, so maybe someone like Paul can give you a little bit of advice on how to word it.
Get it in before the 16th.
Oh, yeah, for sure, yeah.
Sure. I'd start on that. But before you start circulating your petition, have your coffee.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, just to, yeah.
You really-
Smooth things over. Good idea.
yeah.
The
it's a-
sooner, the better.
Soften them up.
Yeah.
Very good, Ed. Thanks.
Welcome.
Don't drink coffee.
Thanks, I don't drink coffee. Excuse me? No.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, thank you both.
Looks like good luck, looks like a nice proposal. Okay.
Also, it's a numbers thing. They wanted.
The development is really nice, and this has nothing to do with the development, but that road going up there,
Yeah.
which is it Driftway or Kent Street? That's always confusing.
Yeah,
Driftway.
that's
Is it Driftway that goes all the,
Oh,
it's so narrow.
Driftway.
It
And
is.
then there's a telephone pole, and there's a tree, and it was like,
Yeah, and then the road goes up.
That's a traffic comment. Haven't you heard that before? You're supposed to be calm.
Stay calm.
Exactly.
all right, so is there any accounting?
Oh, you got Inley School,
Yeah,
Oh.
water?
Oh, I thought that was going to be continued.
Oh, you have to vote it.
Okay.
Oh,
So, there is at 9:30, we're a little bit beyond, so it's 9:40 PM. We have a public hearing for the stormwater permit at 46 Watch Hill Drive, which is the Enley School, and the applicant owner is Enley. So I believe we have a continuance
Yeah, they
and a motion.
requested a continuance.
I move to accept the applicant's request. Well, let me just preface this. Request for continuance, Inley School Stormwater Permit Hearing, 46 Watch Hill Drive. I move to accept the applicant's request to continue the public hearing for the stormwater permit for Inley School Field Expansion at 46 Watch Hill Drive until November 25th, 2014 at 8:30 PM.
Do I have a second?
second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, now,
Okay, now do we have any accounting? It's like, how does that work? Can I sign that too, or does it matter?
I'm going to let you do it.
Okay,
And you're used to this stuff, right?
I can do
Because I'm sitting
dual
in your
duty.
seat.
Yeah. So I have a bill here for $450 for, or I have a motion, I should say, that we approve $450 for the annual dues for the town planner, for Laura Harbottle,
for the whole office, I mean, this is for our whole,
for the national and Massachusetts chapters for the
American
planning, yeah.
Association.
Yeah, thank you, for the entire department. That's $450. In addition, $60.15 for the permitting open house that Laura is going to talk about, I'm sure, in a few minutes, and $11.50 for the name plate for Ann Burbine as the alternate planning member.
Second.
So, all those in favor?
Aye.
You didn't have an old one lying around?
I threw it away.
We have one set.
Do you have a pen? Bob?
I do not.
Oh, okay.
Oh, here we go.
Do we all have to sign that?
I think, how many was, three of us, four
Yeah,
of us?
three.
of us.
There's number 2. There's number 3. You want a pen?
I got a pen.
Okay. when those are completed, if you could put those in the accounting folder.
And we have.
Are there minutes?
There are minutes.
Fantastic. Accounting is done.
Excellent. So I'm going to give you the accounting folder.
Okay.
All right, I move that we approve the Scituate Planning Board minutes for October 9th, 2014. So all those in, or I'm sorry.
second that.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
And since I... It's usually just me who signs that, that's fine. So here is the minutes. And do we have any liaison reports from the Public Building Committee, or?
The Recreation Department has the uncanny ability of scheduling their meetings at about 7 before us on Thursdays.
As does the waterways.
Yeah.
Yeah, actually, the public facilities, too, I noticed was,
Yeah. I mean, it
Public
is just over
facilities,
there,
sorry,
but,
right.
and they usually don't even get rolling till about 7:15, so it's kind of like, hi, bye, and not much there, or I haven't been able to attend, so.
okay. And I think you're on the EDC, correct? Although we did have like a nice little summary, but anything you'd like to add?
No, not really. It's, they did it very well, but I'll keep you posted as it goes forward. Also, I've been on the Facilities Master Plan Committee, and I think that has just about wrapped up, and a presentation will be made Tuesday, the 18th, to the Board of Selectmen about what's happened, what's recommendations, and so on. Will be on the 18th.
Excellent. And I also saw that next, for people that are watching on TV, if depending on when this airs, next Saturday in the afternoon, there's a presentation on the proposed public safety building at
3 o'clock.
At 3 p.m. Thank you, at Pier 44, or the whatever we're calling it now, the Harbor Community Building.
Also, too, for those that would be interested, Jack Livingstone and his associate are doing a presentation at Pier 44, the Harbor Community Building, at 1 p.m. on Saturday to discuss or put forward the proposed land swap up on Route 3A for the proposed development in that neck of the woods, Booth Hill Clap Road. So if people are interested in that, it is at 1 p.m. at the Harbor Community Building.
Thank you, Ann. Any liaison?
A little bit. I have a pipeline through Lindsay D. Simone, who works in the building department office. She's the secretary for both the Public Facilities Commission and the Waterways Commission. So even though I don't attend the meetings, I kind of hear what's going on. Waterways is in sort of debate and discussion of issues involving mooring rights and who can and can't use moorings. So that seems to be the hot topic at the moment. And of course, the Public Facilities Committee is in deep discussion of the library, which is moving along smoothly towards the completion of the design development phase of the documents, and which the town should get a sort of preview of, I would say, probably in a month to 6 weeks at the most, certainly before the Christmas holiday. And also the public safety complex, and presentations for that are coming up over the next several weeks. I think there are a couple in November, maybe one in early December, but there'll be at least 3 separate presentations at different locations, different forms for the public safety complex.
Right, like we mentioned, and I believe it is 3 p.m. this next Saturday, the 8th,
Yep.
is the first one.
Yeah, that's the first one, exactly.
Speaking of waterways, is there, do they have, let's say, not insight, but do they have any say in the harbor master position? I noticed that that was listed on town site, or the town website. So is that?
I guess I don't know the answer to that.
Like who, do you know? Is
The
it
town
Patricia?
administrator is going to hire that person.
Okay.
Yep. That would make sense.
I just didn't know if they had any Like if they interviewed the candidate as well or whatever sometimes.
That I don't know.
Okay. All right, well, thank you, Bob. And then I'm assuming you maybe want to say a liaison about the public permitting process workshop that we had?
Yeah, well, before that, I did want to mention that the decision was made to hire Horsley Witten Group as the consulting engineers for the Toll Brothers development. So they were sent a contract today, and hopefully that will all take place smoothly, and they'll be on board shortly. So that was one thing. And the permitting workshop, Bob was there in his town role, and Richard came as a planning board member. It was really nice to have both of you there. It was an interesting meeting. I think it was well-attended. There were maybe 35, 40 people there.
Yeah, I would say.
Many developers, well, several developers, John Barry, John Tedeschi, Steve Bjorkland, Doug Sheeran were there. The only attorney that was there was Jeff DeLisi. I didn't see any engineers there. And then there were a whole host of builders of different ages and types, and I'd say maybe about 80% of the discussion had to do with consulting engineers and the feelings that they're too expensive, they bog things down, you know,
Or
this
they
sort of
weren't
thing.
consistent. That was what I took
That
away
the
from
prices
it.
were not consistent, and, yeah, I think those were probably the major feelings that were expressed. And I think those feelings would be expected in a group like that. Anything that's going to add to somebody's costs, they're not going to like. I think Richard made a very good presentation of the point that the consulting engineers really serve the board well, and they're important to have. The DPW doesn't have the staff to review all of these plans. They're very detailed, they're very technical, and it's very important to have that review when the planning board is approving
Right.
stormwater.
Well, and I said, hopefully, no disrespect to anyone, but we're not professional engineers on this board. So we need that assistance, someone to tell us, this is what I recommend. So.
On the other side, one of the things that was mentioned that was that I had sat down with the 4 different firms and talked to them about what our expectations are, which is to have a more thorough review from the ones that are kind of giving the, this is great, sincerely type of review. And I know that's an exaggeration, but there's some that are really not detailed enough. There was at least one that went into a review of the zoning bylaw, like on the flexible open space, and that really was kind of overkill, and it's not really engineering type of stuff, it's planning type of stuff. So they were told, don't do that anymore, please, because we really want you to focus on drainage and engineering. Those are the places where we really need the technical skill. So hopefully that will bring people more in line with each other. The hourly rates are generally very, very similar. They're like $10 here, $5 there type of thing. With the possible exception of one firm that seems, we had an estimate from them, and one of the other firms was about 2/3 of what this first firm charged. So we're going to be very cautious about using that first firm, and maybe save them for something complicated. I'm not sure.
Just so I understand the
Yeah.
process right now, let's just say, and I know we don't have 5, but it's an easy number. Let's say we have 5 consulting engineers that we have for our year-long contract, our list. Developer number 1 comes through, they get, let's say, firm number 1. Developer 2 gets firm number 2. Like, it's just like, we just cycle through it correctly? Is that a correct assumption?
Well, that's the way we started out doing it, but there's been, like, consulting engineer number 3 is perceived as being more difficult and more expensive, and there are people that say right up front that they won't go to him.
Okay.
They go kind of around all of us to the town administrator, and they say, you know, make it so that I don't go to this person. And when I get that directive, you know, I don't really have a whole lot of choice, so I just do what I'm told.
Well, I guess in that respect, that's kind of where I was going with this, and I don't know what the board feels about it. Instead of like having a cycle, do you feel that the applicant should be able to choose from a list of 5 or 10 and just say, I like number 3, that's what I want? I mean, I think that's okay as long as we've vetted those 10.
Well, I have another idea about how to do
Okay.
it, but I want you guys, well,
I don't know, what do you guys think?
Interrupt you.
I mean, I was thinking, here's 5, pick 3, and we'll, pick 3 that you like, and, we'll choose one. I mean, I don't want to make it too
right
involved,
now-
but I completely understand that, there are some people that, for any number of reasons, they don't work well for one, they have a bad experience, and you say, I don't want to work with that person again. And as their name comes up, it's like, oh, how can I get out of this? So I can understand giving them the flexibility to work with another consulting and engineer, but yeah, other than, hey, pick 2 out of the 5, and, we'll try and do like that. But yeah, any other ideas would be.
Yeah, it was an interesting suggestion. I'm not saying I'm for it or against it, but one of the developers at this session said they'd almost like to have an RFP. So like here we have the 5 consulting engineers, like put forward, okay, I have this development, let the 5 sort of compete, if you will, for their rates and what services they're going to offer. And then the developer would say, oh, based on your 5 proposals, I'm going to pick number 4. Now, I don't know, maybe that's getting it, maybe it's too much.
Well, the reason why I think there's some other things that you should think about is that there are some subtle differences between them, and different ones may be good at some things and others may be
Right.
good at other things. And I think you want the people that are the best for the particular job, because that's really what serves you the best. To do an RFP would add like another,
Whole layer, I
3
agree,
weeks to the
yeah.
process, and once they figured that out, they'd probably be, I mean, we'd have to write something up, we'd have to shop it around, it would add a lot of work,
Yeah.
frankly. But one of the things that I want to explore, and I've talked with Patrick a little bit about, and he's good with it, but it'll probably be till after town meeting to sit down with Tricia and see what she thinks about it. I think you want to maybe keep the simpler projects with one type of person who does maybe the less extensive reviews, and maybe like the 40Bs that CBA does, where you've had a lot of drainage issues because they don't usually have a design that gets approved beforehand. Those can be real, like, hair pullers for the abutters. We've had one where, I don't know, there must be like 100 emails from one abutter who felt like his property was flooded because of this 40B. And both he and the developer were really kind of in-your-face type people. And not that there's anything wrong with that, but to kind of get a good solution for that, that seemed to take somebody with like a lot of serious expertise, and also somebody that wasn't afraid to get in people's face and just say, no, you got to do it this way, or that erosion control isn't going to work, that stormwater is going to go right through. I mean, someone who could really like insinuate themselves into a situation and be very assertive. So I think we all need to kind of take some of those things into consideration, and I would like to keep the process more predictable. I don't think somebody with a 3-lot subdivision should necessarily have the highest review, but in some cases, maybe that should not, be like 100% always the case. Like one of the 3-lot that we had with the tributary going through it, with so much technical information that was required. I mean, I don't know how else that could have been reviewed well. So I think the choice should be really yours, as opposed to the developers. I think you guys should really be in the driver's seat.
Almost like a two-tier system, have kind of the economy project, economy consulting engineer. Economy might not be the right word.
Yeah, I
but-
know what you mean, like
Yeah.
economy class kind of
Exactly,
thing.
exactly.
Yeah.
This is relatively straightforward, you can handle this relatively straightforward and easily, and then the more involved ones are more involved.
Well, and I like the idea, like, even earlier on, we heard from the EDC, or we heard Matt talking about, there's this perception, whether it's true or not, I don't know, but there's a perception out there that it might be difficult to go through some of the processes in town. So if you could create something that's more predictable or consistent, I think that's all that people really want, is consistency. You know, they don't want, at least from what I heard, you know, it to be $10 an hour over here, and then the next time you go through, it's $50 an hour. I mean,
Yeah.
that,
And I think that's an easy thing to sort of hang your hat on, but what really happens is it's 10 hours over here and 50 hours over there, even though the hourly rate may be the same.
yeah, that's true.
I think it's been too much that way, and we're trying to kind of rein that in. How successful we'll be remains to be seen, because we haven't really had any developments come in.
Yeah.
So,
And the developers must know going forward with a project, just seeing it going, this is going to be more involved. This is not a straightforward three-lot subdivision. This is, you know, stormwater, erosion, all those things. So they might come in and say, you know, I'd rather try and work this past the lower level guys or economy rate guys, instead of knowing that it's, you know, it's gonna need the upper level guys, because they're actually gonna go through it and pull it apart, whereas the developer's trying to get, not always, but get, you know.
Take the path of least resistance.
Exactly,
Right.
exactly.
As anyone would.
But going into it, they know that they have all these considerations, and they know that they're gonna be very involved.
Right.
So that might be part of their complaints as well.
I think so, and I think another piece of all of this was that with the more complicated three-lot subdivision that we had, I think it was that particular builder's first subdivision that they had ever done.
Right.
So it was like a little bit of a nightmare to him, but, you know, it wasn't anyone's fault. It was just,
Right.
you know, the first one, you get a piece of land that's, you know, really a crazy piece of land.
Next to our water source, our
Yeah.
primary
Yeah.
water source.
Well, maybe. But, you know, it did bring up some, I think, very valid points that should be addressed, and so for that reason only, I think, alone, I think it was a discussion worth initiating, and it's a discussion worth having. I mean, one other thing I took away from the meeting is that, on this same subject, the comment that the review engineer or engineering firm probably has a point of view of how they would have done the project. And it might not be the same point of view and approach that the engineer who has designed and stamped the project has. You know, the developer is paid a lot of money to have his engineering done and certified by the person who did the design. And the review shouldn't sort of get hung up on differences of philosophy or approach. It should be a very pragmatic, factual.
Yeah, it shouldn't be a second design.
Although I was
Right.
thinking about that particular question, and I was looking back, at least on my tenure here, I couldn't think of any examples where maybe I'm wrong, or I couldn't think
Yeah.
of it, but where someone said like, oh, well, I wouldn't have done it this way with this rain garden, you should have been another kind of basin or something.
I've heard
Maybe.
that. I think I've heard
Well,
that.
I think that, I think it's tricky to evaluate that, because what the applicant's engineer does is going to be, I think, partly affected by how much time they have, and, you know, the fact that maybe they've got a number of jobs going at once or whatever. But regardless of that, I think the consulting engineer's job is to say, well, did you really look at the soils in that detention basin? Now, what do you think those soils are? And so often, they haven't really done, soils tests there. So they don't really know the infiltration, or they're making some kind of assumptions that maybe are a little bit much to
gray area.
make based on the need to do these things rapidly. It's like one, their income is based on the rapidness, the other one, the income is almost based on the slowness, and they're like not, you kind of got to get them all together. But I don't see, I've never seen like a real redesign. I mean,
No,
not with the
that's-
people that we
That's an
have.
overstatement.
I don't think with either
There-
John or Pat.
There's been lots of tweaks.
Yeah, there are definitely gray areas.
Well, there are tweaks yeah. Yeah, I'm not sure, do you have a way you can think of, I mean, if you're thinking that,
Nope.
and maybe it's true, that
Nope.
maybe there are some tweaks that didn't absolutely, but I mean, I think when they're here, the consulting engineers, they're working for you all, and they need to justify
Right.
what they're saying to you and not make it like they're, running up the clock, make more money in a way that's not really justified by what you want. I mean, I think they want to be doing what you want.
Yep.
So I think if you ever have that feeling, you need to kind of, jump on it and ask them if it's, why is that necessary?
Yeah.
Oh, can I just chime in here? I think that our consulting engineers do tell you why it's necessary. They're going through, and a lot of the changes that maybe some of the developers perceive is related to stormwater standards, which are part of your regulations. And our engineer is saying how it does not comply, or it does comply with the regulations. And therein lies a big difference of opinion.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, I definitely think that's their, I shouldn't say their primary responsibility, but to tell us where it doesn't comply. Like it doesn't meet these standards that we put forward. But I guess where it gets gray area is if they suggest, well, to comply, you might try doing this or that. That's where, I don't know. That was,
I don't know that they do that very much.
They're not doing that.
Yeah, that's what I thought too. That's what I'm saying.
They're saying that it doesn't comply, you have to comply. They're not, I mean, they will tell you their job is not to redesign the project.
Yeah.
I think the aggravation comes up because it does cost, they're probably paying their engineer as much or more than the consulting engineer is making. And when they have to go to their own engineer and say, I think it's very hard for them to say, oh my God, you really screwed this up, and now it's costing me an extra $10,000, because those people are their representatives to
Right.
you. And it's very hard for them to confront those people, even though they have every reason to do so.
Right.
So I think that makes it difficult. So they tend to sort of protect them, and the consulting engineers get really dumped on, I think.
Right. So yeah, it's not an easy situation. I could see definitely both sides to that particular issue that came up, that a lot of discussion on that night about
But I mean, Karen, but both myself and Karen also, I think partly because of her background, she's like right in there in the trenches.
Absolutely.
With me.
Yeah.
And it's not always an easy position. It wasn't an easy position sitting over at the community building the other night. It felt
Right.
a little bit like the raw meat in front of the,
And
in front of
I
the
definitely
puppies and
wanted to
the
say that I
wild dogs.
do, well, for both of you, I do appreciate the fact that you were there, all the members of the different departments. I think that was really good, but I did feel that too, that it was definitely not the easiest for you.
Yeah, well, I think anybody, in that position would have the same, the same feeling. But
Now,
anyway, you could just. Yeah.
Was that permitting open house? Was that something that you've done before?
No, Tricia had talked to me about the need to do something like this. And so I went on the planner's listserv, and I just sort of said, has anybody ever had like a summit meeting with developers of some kind? And some people had meetings just to talk about complaints, and most of the feedback I got was those did not really go very well. Those were a little, they didn't feel like there was much that really resulted from it. But this one planner from Great Barrington he said every year they have a permitting open house. Theirs is different because it's more open to the public, but the developers come too, and it's more proactive. It's more like, these are the common mistakes that are made, this is how you avoid them. But it doesn't have to be like high-handed, it can be very like
Right.
relaxed. And also that, I'm sorry, I just lost my train of thought.
Well, even
They do it every year, and it's not like focusing on complaints. I mean, Tricia specifically wanted the focus to be partly on the complaints.
Well, I think it dovetails what Matt was talking about. One of the first thing his recommendation was like, what was it Dedham that had his example was the permitting, like if you want, if you want retail, these are the things you have to do, the 5 things you have to check off. You know, you have to go to the building department and the planning board or whatever.
It's a great
Yeah.
resource.
And it sounds like we've already at least started that, which is
We have a
good.
similar, frequently asked questions handout that we can provide. It's mostly geared to residential, but the building office has documents like that.
But in general, I thought it was a great meeting. I know you were on the
Oh,
hot
yeah,
seat.
yeah, no, that's-
But in
that's-
general, if we could, I don't know about every year in a town like Scituate, but maybe every couple of years, we should do something like that. Because there's not, in a small town, there's not as much
Well, I
development.
think it'd be good to hear from everybody about everything.
But it does not have to be adversarial. And sometimes these things can degenerate into being he said, she said, that type of thing. I think, too, that's what happens with competing engineers. It does, one side feels this way, the other side is trying to protect the interests of the town. So it then becomes adversarial, and people are not happy.
Well, I think there is kind of a professional, like, egotism that.
Right.
you know.
And I think having it every year, even though we are a small town, it's all about communication. It's all about just keeping people informed. Some things may have changed. Zoning has been updated. This is happening. That's happening. You know, how do you feel about this? And just give them an opportunity to not necessarily vent, but we get their viewpoint, they get our viewpoint, what we're looking for, and then we can all go forward and hopefully try and stay on the same page.
Right, and I think it ties into exactly what you were suggesting, even with this proposal that was with us, with the golf course and the condos, is like, be proactive.
Right.
Like, don't be, you're an owner on Gilson, and all of a sudden you read in the paper in the Mariner that they're gonna be building, 8 more condos next to you. Well, I didn't know anything about this.
Yeah.
Be proactive, and there may be some issues, there may not be, but it's like, at least people are aware. Like you said, what was your thing, education is 90% of it, or?
Educate, when you educate people, knowledge is power.
Yes.
Knowledge is power. And when people don't understand things, when rumors are rampant, people become frightened.
Right.
And then they pretty much
Blinders
don't,
go on.
they shut down, and it becomes illogical, and, people are ranting. I mean, you have no idea what's going on in terms of people being really upset about this land swap. Because in reality, the first time anybody ever heard of it was 2 weeks ago, that it suddenly came,
Well,
and it's just, but
And
again,
I'll be, I'm guilty of that too, because I was about the same thing. When I heard about it, I'm like, well, where did this come from?
right, well, see, nobody knew that it had been I can tell you all about that, but the thing is, I think in terms of the consultant, once upon a time, and of course, obviously, you have told me, Laura, things have changed. We used to have just one consultant, didn't we? Whether it was CEI or whether it was somebody else, and now we have a rotating group of people?
Well, yeah, and I think there have been some benefits to that.
Right.
I think it's good to have
Okay,
multiple.
but I think really that the strong recommendation should actually come from the town planner, because she's looking over the subdivision or whatever's coming in, should be able to make a recommendation.
Well, that's one reason why I thought the zoning should kind of come back, through me, because I had multiple conversations with one of the consulting engineers about the flexible open space bylaw, and you'd have to kind of re-educate him, every time about, no, the lots don't have to meet zoning, and so on and so forth. So the zoning, I think, comes through planning. The drainage and road construction pretty much go through the consulting engineers, although recently, Karen and I both go out to sites, we look around, we measure trees, we look for cracks in detention basin walls. I mean, there are a lot of things that we can see, then we feed to one of the consulting engineers, and then they say, oh yeah, that's really important. Oh yeah, that curb has got to be reset, things like that. So anyway. So
Well, I think it was good.
It's good.
Yeah, I definitely just think it's good to be proactive, and if we want to do something like that every couple of years or something, I think that would be excellent.
Yeah, and they even have in Great Barrington, they even have the press come and, write a little story for the newspaper about it. And then I think it potentially can make the town look good.
Yeah.
I think focusing on problems is never a great idea.
No, it isn't.
Yeah.
That's just my
We need to start
age and
focusing on
experience.
successes, but we also need to start focusing on how can we change the perception that it is difficult to do business in the town
Exactly,
of
whether it's a
Scituate.
reality or not.
Right, but sometimes just the idea that this is difficult makes it difficult, and assumptions are made. So, one of the things that came out of, I think it was EDC, I mentioned it to you, or might have, I don't remember, I go to too many meetings. In some communities, I think Carver's one of them, when somebody comes in with a subdivision or with some type of a plan, they sit down with everybody, the planner, building, the traffic police, fire, everybody sits down at a table, the plans are put forward, they haven't been presented to, it's an informal, but people look at it. There's feedback, so that nothing is a surprise.
That's actually, I'm really interested that you said that, because that's one thing that a lot of communities do that I got feedback about when I went onto the listserv asking about this. And we have the DRT all set up. There's no reason that couldn't be worked into it. So that is something that I'm going to be talking with Tricia about.
It seems like a good idea. Like, for instance, the country club tonight could have been something where, like, everyone was informally, it's all discussed.
Could have been,
with a different
yeah.
town, because who knows? Maybe the fire department says absolutely not. You can't have another truck up or another units up there because of there's no pressure or something like that.
Yeah, yeah, no, that's,
So,
there are all kinds of
I think it's
possibilities.
good.
The other thing, too, is, someone had mentioned to me that he was coming to a meeting, and he wasn't notified that traffic rules and regulations had met the night before, and he should have been there.
There are a couple of boards in this town that either they don't have the support staff or something, but there are that have that happen like on a continuing basis.
And that's something that needs to be rectified.
Yeah, I
because
completely agree with
it's not fair.
Yep.
And it also gives the appearance that we are not pro-business.
Yeah.
So, anyway.
Well, anyway, I will send around the link to the Dedham guide to, it's something called like Doing Business in Dedham, and it's actually kind of cute. I think you'll enjoy looking at it. Very nicely illustrated. It's really kind of a beautiful thing that I don't know how much it costs to duplicate it, but it'd be neat for all of you to see it. I think you get something from that, and then we can maybe talk about what kinds of things like that we could be doing in Scituate.
Yeah, and just in general, I thought, from reading the, again, proposal for Phase 3 from the MAPC, there were a lot of really good suggestions in there that were things that are actionable, I think, or could be actionable. I know others on this board and other people I've spoken to said this town does a lot of studies and then we kind of put it on a shelf and we don't do anything with it. But I really like...
I can attest to that.
Yeah, but I think this actually has things that are small enough that they can be actionable.
It's, as Matt pointed out, and it's true, it's small successes. And one small success builds on another, builds on another, and pretty soon, it just sort of all falls into place.
Right.
We can't bludgeon people with, this is what we're going to do.
Exactly.
It has to come about, it has to be phased.
And kind of grow organically, for
Yes.
lack of a better term.
Yes.
So anyway, I did, just to reiterate, I just thought that proposal had a lot of small things that could be done that you, like you said, could be built upon and get successes. So
Yes.
I really liked it. I thought they did a very good job.
Oh, he's been phenomenal. Really, it has been eye-opening, educational, and that's it. The more people who read it, who understand it, we can then go forward. Because, we can talk about, all right, transportation, having everything around the train station, but how do you get to the train station to the harbor? So that begs the question, sort of a chicken or egg, do we need taxi service? What type of intermodal transportation do we then need to go forward with? Which is not the planning board's issue,
Right.
but it's
Well-
something to think about.
There was at one point, you weren't on the board then, but there was the whole GATRA, and
And
you
that
had
went
you had a
south.
route and everything, and then what happened? It just sort of evaporated.
They didn't have enough money to run the service,
Okay,
so.
but there was.
There was some, but it needs to be more of a private enterprise, that somebody needs to pick up and run with it.
Before we have Bob's motion, real quickly, can you, if it's okay, can you quickly sort of state what we're talking about with the property on 3A near the Ellis Estate and the property swap? My understanding is that it's a parcel of land for them to get access off of 3A so that they can build this apartment community for 200,
They
I
can
believe?
build the apartment
Anyway.
anyway. They have access on Clap Road, and they have access at the end of Booth Hill Road.
Mhm.
What they want to do is to take 1.5 acres from the town of Scituate. We actually have to go to the legislature because it's in conservation. And in the process, swap 26 acres of land, more or less, give to the town, and then they would have, and that land actually could also hold another development.
Just for sort of a point of order, none of this really has anything to do with the planning
No,
board.
it's not, it'll go before the zoning board of appeals.
All right, I'm sorry for asking that question.
No, but I think it's a valid question to know, that it's education. So that strip of land, I never realized until I was at that selectmen's meeting, that there's actually a piece of the Ellis property on that side of 3A.
Well, I think it was in the paper today, they mentioned the Ellis property, and I was kind of confused, because I'm like, well, that's on the other side.
No, it's almost a pie-shaped piece.
Okay.
So-
Well, you know what, I don't want to belabor, I am planning to attend that on Saturday afternoon if I can swing that, so, but it seems to make sense. And then there's the potential that Scituate might also get some potentially ball fields, or land at least where that we
It's
could.
8 acres of upland or something. But the problem with this, and again, it's all about communication, it came out, it was dropped like a stone 2 weeks ago.
Mhm.
And then they voted on it immediately. And then 2 days later, it went to the advisory board, and they okayed it. So people were sort of left, what's going on?
Yeah. Okay, well, any other liaisons or reports? Do I have a motion?
I move that we adjourn.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Well, thank you, and I'm sure...